Dead America. Tales of the First Month. The Old West Theme Park. By Derek Slayton. Chapter 1. Day 0. 6 p.m. Just outside Boone, North Carolina, tucked away high in the mountains, lay a relic of a bygone era, a tiny Old West-themed amusement park. Built in the 1950s during the height of the cowboy movie craze in Hollywood, the Old West Park had once been a cherished destination for families from North Carolina and its surrounding areas. But in more recent times, the park had fallen on hard times, its glory days fading into memory as dwindling visitors became the norm. To combat this decline, the park's owners had turned to promotions aimed at the students of the nearby college. Though these efforts had been moderately successful, the park had yet to reclaim the vibrancy it had once known. Despite lacking the glamour and high-energy atmosphere of the bars and clubs near campus, 21-year-old college student Emma was thrilled at the prospect of starting her first shift at the park. As she navigated her way down the winding driveway toward the front gate, she couldn't help but wonder if she was in the right place, surrounded as she was by thick woods on either side. After nearly half a mile, the trees gave way to an open area, revealing a modest-sized parking lot with a scattering of cars near the entrance. Emma pulled into a space, her excitement mounting as she noticed families sitting in their vehicles, children and adults alike dressed in Old West-themed costumes. "You gotta love October," Emma remarked to herself, taking in the scene before her. As Emma surveyed her surroundings, her eyes landed on an older-looking security guard stationed at the front gate. He sat before a towering metal gate that connected to a fence seemingly encircling the entire park. Pulling her car to a stop, Emma rolled down her window, but before she could utter a word, the guard addressed her. "I'm sorry, miss, but the park doesn't open for another hour. If you want to park and wait, you're more than welcome to," he informed her. "Oh, I know, sir. I'm Emma, the new employee. Gabe told me to come in tonight but didn't tell me where to park," Emma replied. "Well, hey there, Emma. If you drive up to the far end of the lot there and hang a right, you'll see the employee parking. There's a door there that will let you into the park," the security guard offered with a friendly tone. "Do you know where I'm supposed to go once I'm inside?" Gabe wasn't exactly forthcoming with the information, Emma inquired. "You might want to try the office. It's inside City Hall on Main Street. You can't miss it," he suggested. "Thank you," Emma said gratefully as she drove off, quickly locating the designated parking area. Exiting her car, she stretched her lithe frame, not because her muscles were sore from the short drive from college, but rather to steady herself before stepping into a new job for the first time. Upon entering through the employee entrance, Emma couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement as she took in the scene before her. A quaint Old West downtown stretched out for 3 blocks, adorned with various shops, a restaurant, and a saloon. "This is so much fun," Emma remarked. As Emma scanned the area, she spotted a few employees, mostly young college students like herself, strolling about in Old Western attire. Glancing down at her jeans and sweatshirt, she shook her head, a hint of doubt creeping into her mind. "Hopefully they provide me something like that, because if not, I'm really going to be out of place," she murmured to herself. With resolve, she began to walk down the middle of Main Street, soaking in the sights and relishing the moment. Eventually, her eyes fell upon City Hall. She approached the front door and gave it a tentative knock before pushing it open. "Hello? Anybody home?" she called out into the quiet interior. James, a 25-year-old grad student dressed like a grizzled prospector, emerged from behind a counter to greet her. Despite his appearance, he spoke in a normal manner. "Don't tell me they opened the gates early," he quipped upon seeing Emma. "Oh no, I'm the new girl. I'm looking for Gabe," Emma replied. James shook his head, his fingers finding their way to the bridge of his nose as he muttered under his breath. "Jesus Christ, Gabe. A new girl on a night shift." He took a deep breath to compose himself before turning his attention back to Emma. "Sorry about that. I promise it's not you," he reassured her with a sympathetic smile. "It's okay. It looks like you have quite the crowd building out there," Emma remarked, trying to ease the tension. "Oh yeah, I know. It's like this a lot during the special weekend nights in October." especially this close to Halloween, which is why I question why he'd start someone new, James explained. Just then, a shrill voice pierced the air from behind James. It belonged to Gabe, the slightly overweight 35-year-old manager who had been a fixture at the park for years. Well, James, not that I answer to you, but we've had 7 people call out tonight. Plus, Logan and Sarah look like they're on their deathbeds, but they're at least a warm body, Gabe announced. So instead of running short, you're going to tie one of us up training someone new? James retorted. Oh no, James, I'm not tying up anyone. I'm tying you up. Meet your shadow for the night, Gabe declared, his grin betraying a sense of satisfaction at his little power play. James turned around to see Emma cautiously waving and offering a half smile. I'm Emma. James returned her smile with a nod before facing Gabe, who seemed quite pleased with himself. Okay, fine, but at least put me on the train tonight, James requested. Now, why would you want to do that? You're down at Prospector Junction. That's an easy enough spot to have someone new, Gabe replied. James turned to Emma, silently imploring her to go along with his plan. She gave him a subtle nod of agreement. We can't have someone new out there who doesn't even know the layout of the park. People are going to be asking for directions, and she's going to have to interrupt me while I'm trying to corral a few dozen people. It's going to be a nightmare. At least on the train, we'll have a captive audience, and she can learn the layout, James argued convincingly. Emma, have you ever been here before? Gabe inquired. I'm sorry, sir, but I haven't. I applied at the job fair they had on campus last week, Emma replied respectfully. After a moment of consideration, Gabe rolled his eyes and nodded begrudgingly. Okay, fine, you two are on train duty. But make sure she learns the layout because I sent out Anna and Carson down to campus to hand out half-price tickets. With any luck, by the time 9 o'clock rolls around, we're going to have a full house, Gabe relented, giving them their marching orders. Thanks, Gabe, James acknowledged with a nod of appreciation. James walked over to the counter, where Gabe had set a radio for him. Go get changed and get over to the train, Gabe instructed. James nodded, and the two of them exited the City Hall office. Once they were a few steps away from the door, James spoke up. Thanks for backing me up in there, he acknowledged. I figured I'm going to be hanging around with you all night, so might as well go ahead and get on your good side, Emma replied with a shrug. James chuckled at her response and raised the radio, changing the channel before speaking into it. Hello, haunted bank robbers. Is there anybody there? He called out. After a long pause, Emma looked puzzled, which James noticed. One of the highlights of the train ride is a bank robbery and escape. The train pulls into this little town area. There's a small explosion inside the bank, then the train doors open, and the bank robbers run through like they're holding everybody up, James explained. That sounds like fun. But how are they haunted? Emma inquired, still confused. Since it's the spooky season, Gabe thought they should look like ghosts or something. James clarified with a chuckle. Emma still looked confused, which James noticed. Yeah, I know, but it's basically the bank robbers dressing up for Halloween, he added. A man's voice came over the radio, sounding distressed. Bank robbers here. Who is this? The voice asked. It's James. Is that you, Rowan? James responded. Yeah, man. Are you on the train tonight? Rowan inquired. Yep, and the new girl, Emma. Are you guys set up? James asked. There's 4 of us in the waiting room just chilling. But man, I don't think Logan's going to make it, man. He's in rough shape, Rowan reported. Put him on, James instructed. You're not hearing me, man. He's in rough shape. He's curled up on the ground in the fetal position, Rowan replied with concern. Is he still breathing? James inquired urgently. Yeah, but not much else other than that, Rowan confirmed. Before James could respond to Rowan, a loud train whistle pierced the air from the front gate, startling Emma. James stood there for a moment, his concern for Logan evident but overshadowed by his frustration. Listen, man, I'm guessing you heard the whistle, James began. Yeah, people are roaming free in the park, Rowan confirmed. Which means the first train is going to be heading your way in 20 minutes or so, James informed him. This kid needs to go home and get into bed. Not running through the train like a maniac, Rowan lamented. I tell you what, Rowan, get through this first ride, and I'll get somebody up there to replace him. There's just not enough time right now, James offered. Thanks, James, Rowan replied gratefully. Just don't tell Gabe, okay? James requested. Trust me, I ain't telling him shit. He's the reason Logan is here and not home. Threatened to fire him if he didn't show up tonight, Rowan revealed with frustration. Yeah, I hear you, man. Hang tight, and we'll see you on the train in 30 or so, James reassured him. We're locked in the waiting room, so we'll be ready to go, Rowan confirmed before the walkie-talkie went silent as he pocketed it. He really threatened that kid with firing if he didn't come in when sick. I'm starting to think I made a mistake taking this job, Emma remarked. Gabe normally isn't that bad of a boss, just sits in his office and watches television, James explained. That doesn't sound like much of a boss, Emma observed. As long as stuff gets done, he doesn't really care. And he signs the paychecks on time. He just gets stressed this time of year because it's a make or break month for the park. As long as you keep your head down for a few weeks, I think you'll like it here. We have a lot of fun, James assured her. Okay, James, I'm going to trust you, Emma replied with a nod. Good, because I'm about to show you just how much fun we have, James promised with a grin. James motioned towards a building on their right, and Emma followed him inside. As she stepped through the door, she was greeted by the sight of several Old West costumes and a couple of people near the back behind the counter. Hey Kennedy, you back there? James called out as he entered. What's up, James? Kennedy, a middle-aged woman with a bright smile, responded. Need a couple of costumes, stat. We're on the train tonight, and the first one leaves in about 15 minutes, James said. Kennedy sprang into action, rushing out onto the floor. As she approached them, she grabbed a pair of conductor overalls with a hat, tossing them to James. Go get dressed, she instructed him. James nodded and hurried off to the changing room. Meanwhile, Kennedy gave Emma a once-over, a contemplative look crossing her face. What is it? Emma inquired. Just trying to get a sense of what would be appropriate for you on the train. And I'm really coming up blank because I don't think you'd look good in overalls like James. Kennedy explained honestly. Emma glanced around at the racks of costumes, spotting a nice brown and tan skirt outfit. She picked it up and held it in front of her, as if modeling it. Maybe instead of being a train employee, I could dress like a passenger? Emma suggested. I like it, Kennedy agreed with a smile. James, you got a smart one tonight? She called out to him. Fantastic. James responded from the changing room. Okay, girl, go get dressed because that train isn't going to wait on anybody, Kennedy urged. Chapter 2. James and Emma, freshly attired in their period-looking outfits, stepped out of the costume shop onto the bustling street, which was quickly filling up with families eager to enjoy the amusement park. That's a solid choice on the outfit. You look nice, James complimented Emma with a smile. Thank you. It's going to take a little bit to get used to it, but I kind of dig it, Emma replied, adjusting her skirt. Just then, a train whistle sounded in the distance, confusing Emma. Are they announcing that they're really opening the park now? She asked, furrowing her brow. No, that's actually our train announcing its arrival at the station. Come on, we should hurry, James explained, taking Emma's hand and leading her along. I thought you were in charge of the train? Surely they aren't going to leave without us, Emma protested. Oh, believe me, they will. Because there's no conductor in the train. It's all automated, James revealed with a smirk. Emma gave James a puzzled look. How is an old-time steam engine train automatic? Long story short, a couple of years ago, the original steam engine broke down, and it was cheaper to get a modern subway train and slap some wooden parts on the outside than it was to repair it, James explained. Well, that's a bit disheartening to hear, Emma remarked, a hint of disappointment in her voice. Honestly, unless you go into the front car, you'd never know the difference, James said. The train whistled again, prompting James and Emma to pick up the pace. They moved quickly down the remainder of Main Street before hanging a right on a side street. Immediately, they were greeted with a small train, complete with the makeshift steam engine, and 3 mid-sized cars hooked on behind it. The platform was crowded with people eager to board. As soon as they stepped onto the train, James transitioned into conductor mode, his voice loud and clear, as if he had flipped a switch and become his character. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Old West Express. We're going to be taking off in just a few minutes, so if you'd please find your seat, I'll be making a full announcement as we're underway, James announced to the passengers. He motioned for Emma to follow as they walked up to the front of the lead car. James opened the door, stepping through a curtain with Emma close behind. They found themselves in the engine room, a small space with a couple of seats off to the side and a microphone attached to the wall. Several monitors displayed views from all 3 of the cars. Emma walked around, inspecting the space. We have a few minutes. Do you want the grand tour? James offered. Might as well, Emma replied. Okay, Main Street is pretty obvious and self-explanatory. The train that we're on goes in a 2-mile loop around the outer edge of the property. While it looks like there are thick woods on the backside, it's really just enough trees to cover up the fencing, James explained, pointing out various landmarks on the map. I guess somebody got tired of college kids breaking in and causing trouble? Emma suggested. Gabe doesn't care about college kids causing trouble, so long as they pay the admission fee first, James chuckled, giving Emma a knowing look. Emma chuckled, shaking her head before going back to focusing on the presentation. Okay, so once we cast off, we're going to be riding around, and for the first half-mile or so, it's just beautiful mountain scenery. At the first stop is the other town, where the bank robbery happens, James explained. And where the spooky robbers run through the aisles, Emma interjected. Yep, just like the train, the doors are on autopilot. So once we get to our spot, there's a small explosion that goes off in the bank, the doors open, and they run through, James confirmed. That should be fun to watch, Emma remarked with a smile. Yeah, for you maybe. I have to go out there and get roughed up a bit, James admitted. Really? In front of the kids? Emma asked, a hint of surprise in her voice. Normally they just point their guns at me, but during the spooky nights, they push me down too since it's a slightly older crowd, James explained. Emma glanced at the monitors, noticing that most of the younger people on the train were teenagers. She nodded as James continued. After that, we head up to the trick shot presentation. Old Tex fires off a few shots, hits some stuff, and then it's a nice quiet mile-long ride overlooking the mountains. And then we do it all over again, James concluded. How many times does it run a night? Emma inquired. It's a 30-minute round trip, and we're open until midnight. So it's a good thing you pick something comfortable to wear, James remarked with a grin, gesturing to Emma's outfit. Why don't you get comfortable and watch the first trip around? After you see how things go, we can see about getting you involved later on tonight, James proposed. Sounds like fun, Emma agreed enthusiastically. As Emma took a seat, the radio crackled to life once more, but this time Rowan's voice sounded more panicked. However, it was hard to hear over the train whistle, which was especially loud since they were in the engine. Help me. God, help me. Rowan's voice pleaded urgently. James held the radio to his ear, straining to make out the words amidst the incomprehensible yelling. There were growls and other loud noises that added to the confusion. Calm down, Rowan. We're on the way to you. Just do your job, one quick run through, and I'll get Logan out of there, James promised. He waited for a reply, but all he heard was moaning and some other indistinct sounds. A hint of frustration crossed his face as he raised his voice slightly. Rowan, just do your job, man. It's going to be a long night, and you're not helping at this point, James urged before releasing the button on the radio. Emma watched the exchange, her brow furrowed in concern. Is he always like that? She asked James. Most of the staff are college kids who would rather be out drinking than working. So yeah, they act out. James explained with a sigh, As the train picked up steam, a small light flashed beside the microphone. James walked over to it, grabbing the microphone and preparing to switch it on. "When you see this light, it means we're 2 minutes out from the next stop," James said. Emma nodded as James flipped on the microphone and slipped into his actor mode. "Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the haunted Old West Express. For your safety, please remain seated with your hands inside the windows at all times. Also, please keep the aisle clear because you never know when some unexpected guests will show up," James announced to the passengers. He glanced out the window, noticing that they were approaching the edge of the small town setup. "Now, I'd like to be the first to welcome you into our sister town of Springfield. It's a quiet little mountain town filled with some wonderful people," James proclaimed theatrically. As the train came to a halt, James paused for a moment before continuing. "However, because of how wonderful this little slice of heaven is, some less than savory characters show up from time to time," James added. Just then, a muffled explosion echoed from the bank about 10 yards away. It wasn't anything all that powerful, but enough to draw the attention of the park guests. "Oh no," James exclaimed, playing along with the scene. "It looks like some of those bad guys are here right now, robbing the bank." The train's doors opened right on schedule, but to James's surprise, there was no immediate sign of the robbers. Perplexed, he leaned out the window and let out a sharp whistle. In response, a figure emerged from the bank, its appearance ghastly, bloodied, and bearing numerous bite marks. Covered in blood, with torn flesh on his arms and shoulder, the figure paused for a moment before fixating on the train and letting out a grotesque moan. It lurched forward, followed by 3 more similarly gruesome creatures emerging from the bank. "That's some good makeup on them," Emma remarked. "They almost look like zombies." James, momentarily taken aback, quickly switched into character. "Look out, everybody," he declared, his voice commanding. "We have some bank robbers on board. Protect your valuables and fear not. I'll take care of them." James strode purposefully towards the door, while Emma remained fixated on the monitors. "Man, they really go all out on their performance," Emma remarked casually, her eyes scanning the screen. But her tone shifted as she continued to watch. "James, something's wrong." Meanwhile, James reached for the door, his hand hovering over the handle as Emma's words echoed in his mind. "What the hell?" James muttered as he swung the door open, revealing a scene of horror within the first cab. 2 of the zombie robbers were savagely attacking passengers, tearing into their flesh with grotesque fervor. James stood frozen, paralyzed by the gruesome spectacle before him. In a frantic panic, passengers scrambled for the exits, only to stumble over each other in a desperate bid for escape. The once orderly compartment descended into chaos within moments. Reacting swiftly, James rushed forward, pulling a father and teenager back to their feet before pushing them towards the open door. "Get out now," he shouted. Emma, sensing the imminent danger, reached out and yanked James back into the safety of the engine compartment. As she did, she caught sight of one of the attackers following the fleeing passengers onto the platform. With a swift motion, Emma slammed the door shut and locked it, her hands trembling as she turned back to the monitors. "James," she yelled. James, shaken from his stupor, joined her at the monitors, his expression a mixture of confusion and fear. "What in the hell is going on?" he yelled. Emma didn't answer as she and James remained transfixed by the monitors, the violence within the train escalating. "Why can't they get out?" Emma's voice quivered with concern as she gestured towards the second car, where passengers struggled against locked doors. "I don't know," James admitted. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the shrill blast of the whistle, signaling the train's impending movement. "That's why," James declared grimly, his eyes fixed on the unfolding horror. In stunned silence, they watched as the bitten victims rose, now turned into the creatures that had felled them, attacking their fellow passengers with savage ferocity. Petrified, they witnessed the onslaught. Their paralysis was only broken when creatures began banging on the door. It only took a moment, but the cheap wooden door began buckling underneath the weight of the creatures outside. "What do we do?" Emma's voice trembled with fear, her eyes wide with panic. James's quick thinking spurred him into action. He dashed over to the window, flinging it open with urgency, and gestured for Emma to follow suit. "It's now or never," he declared, his voice commanding. With a nod, Emma allowed James to assist her. She positioned herself at the window, hesitating momentarily as she observed the train's gradual acceleration. But James's urgency spurred her into action. With a deep breath, she thrust her legs out the window, pushing off from the train and landing roughly on the grass below. The impact knocked the wind out of her, and she lay there for a moment, gasping for air. As James joined her on the ground, Emma's relief was short-lived. She watched in horror as the undead creatures within the engine futilely reached out towards them, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. With a sense of dread settling over her, Emma observed the horror unfolding on the train as it rolled past. Passengers fought desperately against the growing horde of zombies. "What in God's name is going on?" she muttered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden scream, and Emma instinctively recoiled before realizing it was James who had grabbed her arm. She quickly composed herself, but the panic lingered. Their attention was drawn to the platform 50 yards away, where the fake town stood. They watched as 4 zombies spotted them and began pursuit. Emma froze in terror, but James yelled out, breaking her paralysis. "Run to the woods." Chapter 3. James and Emma dashed with all their might towards the woods, the fading light of the sun making their path increasingly obscure. Despite the darkness encroaching around them, they pressed forward, driven by the urgency of their situation and the fear of what lurked behind them. As they neared the shelter of the trees, Emma stole a glance over her shoulder, her heart pounding in her chest. Her eyes widened in horror as she spotted the 4 ghouls in pursuit, their ghastly forms illuminated by the dying light. One wore the unmistakable attire of a bank robber, while the others resembled passengers from the train. 2 of the adult male zombies bore multiple bite marks, evidence of their violent transformation. However, it was the teenager with a single bite mark on his neck that sent shivers down Emma's spine, his blood-stained mouth a reminder of a victim he took a chunk out of. James's firm grip on her arm pulled her back to reality, positioning her safely behind him as he forged a path through the dense foliage. Emma kept her gaze fixed on his back as they raced deeper into the woods, the creatures hot on their trail. With each stride, they put more distance between themselves and the pursuing zombies. The thick underbrush proved to be a hindrance for both them and the undead, slowing their progress. Despite that, over the next 50 yards, the duo managed to put a little distance between them and their violent pursuers. James cast a wary glance backward, confirming that the ghouls were no longer in sight but still within earshot. With a sense of urgency, he seized Emma's arm and guided her towards a large boulder nestled among the trees. They crouched behind the rock, James pressing his finger to his lips to emphasize the importance of silence. Emma nodded in understanding, her eyes wide with apprehension. Taking a deep breath, James stood up slowly, his mind racing with thoughts of how to confront the looming threat. He knew hiding indefinitely wasn't a viable option, those creatures were undoubtedly hunting them. Carefully, James took a few cautious steps forward, his senses on high alert. He stooped to pick up a sizable rock, testing its weight with a few practice swings. Satisfied, he nodded to himself, finding solace in the makeshift weapon. Moving closer to the edge of the boulder, James strained his eyes, hoping to catch any sign of movement from their pursuers. Though the moon had yet to rise fully, the lingering light of the sunset provided enough illumination for him to discern shapes in the darkness. James observed the lone creature with a mix of disbelief and dread, recognizing the familiar form of Rowan clad in the blood-stained bank robber outfit. Despite the dim light, the unmistakable signs of his friend's transformation were evident. Multiple bite marks marred his upper body, and blood smeared around his mouth. "My God, man, what happened to you?" James muttered, his voice filled with sorrow and disbelief. As James scanned their surroundings, he detected no other immediate threats, but the distant sounds of footsteps and moans put him on edge. He instinctively took a step back towards Emma, but his movement was betrayed by the snap of a twig beneath his foot. The noise proved to be a fatal mistake, alerting the zombified Rowan to their presence. Before James could react, the ghoul was upon him, hurtling towards him with frightening speed. In a desperate attempt to defend himself, James swung the rock, but the proximity of the creature left him no room for maneuver. His blow connected with Rowan's shoulder, sending him careening off balance and crashing into a nearby tree. James winced as he witnessed his former friend collide with the broken tree branch, the force impaling him through the gut and emerging from his back. He stood frozen, stunned by the grotesque sight of Rowan thrashing about as if nothing were amiss. "Rowan, what happened to you, man?" James murmured, his voice laced with sorrow and confusion. Emma's approach startled James, who quickly recoiled before realizing it was her. Her comforting touch on his arm calmed him. Speaking in hushed tones, she echoed the question racing through his mind. "James, what is going on?" "I wish I knew, Emma," James confessed. Their attention returned to the creature with the tree limb jutting from its back, displaying no signs of pain but clearly agitated by its immobility. "We need to keep moving," Emma urged. "We need to do something about him," James replied. Emma glanced down at the rock in his hand, forcing him to do the same, weighing his options. He tossed it up and down, contemplating their next move. "I know what you're implying, but I don't know what to do with it. I mean, look at him," James muttered, gesturing towards the impaled creature. Emma nodded towards the creature. "You can try the head." James hesitated, wrestling with the moral dilemma of ending his friend's suffering. He raised the rock, but uncertainty held him back. After a tense moment of indecision, Emma intervened. "I know he's your friend, but he's in pain, and if he gets free, he's a threat. I'll do it." With a solemn nod, James relinquished the rock to Emma. She took a moment to steel herself, feeling the weight of their predicament resting in her hand. Then, without hesitation, she swung the rock with all her strength, striking Rowan squarely in the back of the head. The sickening sound of skull cracking filled the air, but to their horror, Rowan remained standing. Undeterred, Emma delivered another powerful blow, sending the creature crumpling over. They stood there in silence, watching as the lifeless body hung limply from the impaling branch. To ensure that the threat was truly neutralized, Emma cautiously approached and gave Rowan a tap on the shoulder, confirming his demise. The eerie sounds of movement and moans nearby sent a shiver down their spines, prompting James and Emma to freeze in place, their senses heightened as they scanned their surroundings. They pinpointed the source of the noise on the other side of the boulder and remained perfectly still until the creature wandered off, leaving them alone but with the distant echoes of the undead still haunting the air. Coming together, they exchanged worried whispers. "What are we going to do?" Emma asked. "Not ride the train again, that's for damn sure," James responded forcefully. But his resolve wavered as a look of terror overtook him, rendering him speechless. Concern etched on her face. Emma probed, "What is it? What is it?" James struggled to articulate his thoughts, overwhelmed by them. Emma shook him gently, trying to snap him back into the moment. "James, I need you to focus." "What is it?" she implored. "The train is automated," James finally managed to choke out, his voice trembling with fear. Emma's brow furrowed in confusion. "Okay? When it gets back to the town, the doors are going to open, and whatever those things are, they're going to swarm over everybody," James explained. Emma's eyes widened with alarm at the realization of the impending danger. "We have to warn them," she exclaimed. James nodded and reached into his pocket for the radio. However, he pulled his pocket inside out, revealing that there was nothing in there. "Where's your radio?" Emma questioned. James gestured back towards the train tracks. "It must have fallen out when I jumped from the train." Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the distant sound of a whistle. "We have to get to Tex," James declared, his sense of urgency driving him into action. Before Emma could speak, James bolted off. Reacting on instinct, Emma followed suit, her footsteps echoing through the darkness as she struggled to keep pace with him. As they raced through the trees, their hurried movements attracted the attention of the creatures lurking in the woods. Emma glanced over her shoulder, her heart sinking as she saw the undead converging on their path. "James, they're following us," she called out. James remained resolute, his determination unwavering as he surged through the woods. Emma matched his pace, the urgency of their situation spurring her forward. She knew that any hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. In the distance, the sound of gunshots rang out, accompanied by muffled voices over a loudspeaker. Emma strained to make out the words, but the message was obscured by the crackling of the cheaply made speaker. As they emerged from the woods, they were greeted by a brightly lit area about 100 yards away, near the train tracks. James forged ahead, his gaze fixed on the train ahead of them. The distant gunfire persisted, creating a tense backdrop to their sprint. However, the voice emanating from the loudspeaker was different. Instead of calling for help, it sounded performative, almost theatrical, like he was doing his show as normal. As they closed the gap to within 50 yards, the pursuing creatures burst forth from the woods behind them, their pursuit intensifying. The distant sound of another train whistle signaled its departure along the tracks. When they reached the illuminated area, James's voice pierced the air as he shouted out for help. "Tex, we're in trouble. Help," James yelled. Emma's gaze fixed on the figure of an old-school cowboy emerging from behind a target. With his white mustache and graying hair, Tex exuded a rugged aura as he turned towards them. "Those people are trying to kill us. Shoot them in the head," James implored urgently. "Is this a joke, James? I ain't killing anybody," Tex responded, his voice firm. "Do it or we're going to fucking die," James yelled out. Tex's demeanor shifted instantaneously, turning from confusion to being locked in as he reached for his six-shooter. "Hit the dirt," he commanded. James's swift reaction prompted Emma to follow suit, dropping to the ground just as Tex drew his six-shooter. With a practiced motion, Tex fanned the hammer, unleashing a rapid succession of shots. Emma glanced back, her heart pounding as she watched all three pursuing creatures crumple to the ground, each felled by a precise headshot. Despite her relief, she found herself trembling uncontrollably. It took a moment for James to reach her side, his concern evident as he helped her to her feet. "Are you okay, Emma?" he asked. Yeah, I'm fine," Emma replied. As they turned to face Tex, the seasoned cowboy approached, his six-shooter now being reloaded. "Are you two all right?" Tex inquired, his gaze flickering between them. "We're good, Tex. Thank you," James responded gratefully. "Don't mention it," Tex replied, his expression stoic. Emma's emotions finally caught up with her, and she couldn't help but express her gratitude. "Thank you for saving our lives. But I gotta know, do you really trust him that much to kill 3 people on his word?" she asked. Tex maintained his cowboy persona as he spoke, his words carrying the weight of old-fashioned honesty. "Well, miss, I'll be honest with you. If it had been anybody else, I wouldn't have fired. In fact, I wasn't going to fire even though it was James. But once he cursed at me, I knew it was for real." Emma raised an eyebrow in surprise. "You guys work with the public. I'm pretty sure everybody curses." Tex chuckled lightly. "They may, but they don't do it around me. I'm the friendly cowboy, miss, and everybody knows that. When James let that fly, I knew he wasn't messing around. And now that we have that out of the way, why don't you tell me what's going on? Because between these fellas right here, and nobody on the train paying any attention to my show, I'm a little miffed." "I'll explain everything, but we need your radio first," James said with a hint of urgency. Tex nodded. "It's in my building over here. Come on." As the trio hurried towards the building, the distant whistle of the train echoed through the night, signaling its progress halfway around the track. Chapter 4. As the trio burst into the room, James's eyes darted around frantically in search of the radio, but it eluded his sight. Tex, stepping in behind them, promptly directed them to its location. "It's back there by the coffee maker," Tex pointed towards the rear of the room. "Emma, fill Tex in on what's going on." "I have to get Gabe on the line," James instructed, his urgency evident as he dashed off. Tex motioned towards a couple of chairs in the corner. "I know it's not the fanciest of furnishings, but it is mighty comfortable." Emma nodded politely, joining Tex in the chairs. Meanwhile, James swiftly retrieved the radio and tuned it to the office channel. Gabe. Gabe. You need to get on this radio right now. James's voice crackled through the receiver. A tense silence followed, stretching out agonizingly. Frustrated, James couldn't contain his impatience. Gabe, you get on this damn radio right now. He barked, his frustration boiling over. Finally, Gabe's voice crackled through the radio. Let's get something straight right now. You need to adjust your tone when talking to me, James, Gabe replied with a firm voice. Ignoring the admonition, James pressed on urgently. Listen to me, you have to evacuate the park and do it now. Gabe's response was incredulous. What are you talking about? We have over 200 people through the door, and that's not counting the half-price tickets Anna and Carson are handing out. James fought the urge to raise his voice again, knowing it would only alienate Gabe further. He took a deep breath, steeling himself before delivering the news. Gabe, I need you to listen to me carefully. The people on the train are dead. As Gabe's laughter echoed through the line, James's frustration reached a boiling point. That's a good one, James. It really is. Gabe, this isn't a joke. Everybody on that train is dead. And a lot more people are going to be dead if you don't get them out of the park, James pleaded urgently. But Gabe remained adamant. I know what's going on here, James. You've always wanted my job, and you're trying to get me to evacuate the park so you can get me fired, Gabe retorted dismissively. James trembled with rage, realizing that his approach wasn't getting through to Gabe. In a moment of frustration, he unleashed his anger. Listen here, dumbass. I'm a graduate student. This time next year, I'm going to be in an office down in Charlotte making 3 times your salary. I don't give a good goddamn about your job. Now clear the park before a lot more people die, James snapped, his voice seething with rage. Gabe's response was swift and decisive. Thank you for that tirade, James. You're fired, Gabe declared coldly before cutting off the line. James's attempts to reach Gabe again were met with silence, leaving him seething with frustration. Gabe? Gabe? James called out desperately, but there was no response. He resisted the urge to hurl the walkie-talkie across the room, instead taking a moment to gather his thoughts. Think, man, think. Who else can you get a hold of? James muttered to himself, his mind racing for a solution. Finally, he had a eureka moment and changed the frequency on the radio. Is anybody in the street performer room? Anybody, please answer. It's an emergency. James's voice crackled urgently over the radio. After a tense moment, a response came through. Hey, this is Wesley. Who is this? Thank God. Wesley, it's James, James replied, relief flooding through him. Hey man, what's up? Wesley responded casually. Listen to me, you have to get over to the train station and get everybody out of there before the train gets there, James instructed. What? Why? Wesley sounded confused. Something's wrong with the people in the train. They're all dead, but they're not. They're violent, James explained. As Wesley chuckled dismissively, James knew he had to convince him, despite the seemingly outlandish situation. Wesley, I'm telling you the truth, and you need to do it now, James urged. But Wesley remained skeptical. I'm not losing my job for one of your pranks, James, Wesley retorted firmly. James racked his brain for a way to persuade Wesley, finally landing on a gamble. How about losing your job for a date with Anna? James proposed, his tone serious. There was a pause on the line before Wesley's voice came back, filled with uncertainty. Do you really think she'd go out with me? Wesley questioned tentatively. If I talk you up, she will. All you have to do is go clear those people out, James reassured him. Wesley pondered the offer for a moment before relenting. Okay, yeah, I'll do it, man, Wesley agreed finally. Go right now. Clear them out, James instructed urgently. Where do you want me to send them? Wesley inquired. And evacuate them from the park. And then get someplace safe. Someplace that isn't near the park, James advised. After a brief pause, Wesley spoke again, his tone more somber now. "Okay, man, I'm going now," Wesley affirmed. As James set the radio down on the counter with a sigh of relief, he checked his watch, his anxiety mounting. "That boy better move, because the train is going to be back there in 5 minutes," he muttered to himself. Meanwhile, Wesley stood alone in the back room of the Street Performers building, grappling with his decision. Dressed in a comical sheriff's outfit that dwarfed his small 19-year-old frame, he wrestled with the weight of his choice. Who cares about this job? James is a man of his word, and you'll have a date with Anna. "Just do it, man, just do it," Wesley muttered to himself, trying to muster the courage. With a deep breath, he steeled himself, the tension coursing through his veins. He had never disobeyed authority like this before, and the moment weighed heavily on him. Stepping out into the bustling street packed with guests, Wesley surveyed the scene. People moved in and out of shops, engrossed in the Old West atmosphere, oblivious to the impending danger. In the distance, the train whistle sounded, signaling its approach to the station. The noise jolted Wesley into action, propelling him forward. Pumping his legs as hard as he could, Wesley sprinted the 100 yards or so towards the train station. With each step, the sound of the train engine grew louder, urging him on. "You gotta get there, man, you gotta get there," Wesley repeated to himself, his heart racing as he pushed himself towards the platform. Wesley pushed through the bustling crowd, his eyes scanning the platform teeming with expectant travelers. "Folks, I need everybody to." His words were cut short as Gabe's firm grip seized his arm, muffling his voice. Gabe's eyes swept over the gathering crowd as he spoke. He just wants everybody to have a great time on their train ride. There's a lot of fun stuff, lots of great memories. The crowd nodded politely, their attention momentarily diverted from the incoming train. Gabe's gaze bore into Wesley's as he continued. "Let me guess. James told you that people were going to die." Wesley's silence spoke volumes, his guilt evident in his sheepish expression. "Yeah, that's what I thought," Gabe muttered, his tone colored with disappointment. "I fired him, but I'm going to give you one more chance. But you're going to have to work from the bottom up again." Before Wesley could respond, the air was pierced by the sound of screams echoing from the platform. Gabe released his grip on Wesley, his focus shifting towards the commotion. Within moments, a frantic stream of people raced down the stairs, their panicked cries filling the air. "What the hell?" Gabe exclaimed. Gabe's eyes widened in sheer terror as he witnessed the horrifying spectacle unfolding before him. A bloody, zombified guest lunged at a young man, tackling him with savage ferocity. The man struggled desperately, his futile attempts to free himself only met with the creature's relentless assault. With a sickening crunch, the creature sank its teeth into the man's neck, tearing flesh from bone. "Oh my God!" Gabe's horrified cry echoed through the night as he recoiled in terror. The ghastly creature, its blood-stained visage twisted into a grotesque semblance of hunger, turned its gaze towards him, emitting a guttural moan that sent shivers down Gabe's spine. Frozen in place by fear, Gabe could only watch in horror as the creature surged towards him with deadly intent. His heart pounded in his chest, his breath caught in his throat as impending doom loomed closer. Salvation came in the form of another panicked individual, colliding with the creature in a desperate bid to escape the nightmare unfolding on the train platform. As the creature and its unintended victim crashed to the ground, Gabe witnessed the ghoul's pursuit. With a savage lunge, it sank its teeth into the woman's calf, eliciting a piercing scream of agony. The sound echoed through the air, drawing the attention of more of the undead horde, who converged upon the scene with ravenous hunger. Wesley seized Gabe by the arm, forcefully jerking him backward into motion. "We have to get inside." Gabe nodded, adrenaline propelling their hurried steps alongside the throng of fleeing figures on the dusty street. His gaze flickered over his shoulder, a witness to the onslaught of creatures descending upon the hapless victims in their path. The scene unfolding before him churned Gabe's stomach with a sickening dread. The toll of the attackers was insurmountable, an overwhelming tide of violence and suffering he couldn't bear to fully comprehend. Yet, amidst the terror, Wesley's instinct guided them toward the relative safety of City Hall. They scrambled through the entrance, Gabe quickly securing the heavy door behind them, the harsh click of the lock providing them some sense of relief. Peering out through the front window, they bore witness to the harrowing violence consuming the street. Wesley watched as one man stood his ground against two of the creatures, standing in between them and his teenage daughter. He was throwing haymakers, trying to knock them down, but the blows did little more than knock them back for a moment. Wesley looked away as 4 more zombies joined the fray, swallowing up the father and daughter. Wesley was startled when a young woman in Old West clothing began banging on the door. She had blood on her clothing and was holding a plank of wood that has some blood and hair on one end. "Gabe, let me in. Let me in." Her voice was raw with desperation. But Gabe remained resolute, his stance unyielding as he shook his head. "It's too dangerous, Melody," he declared. "You son of a bitch, let me in. Let her in, now," Wesley yelled out. Wesley stepped towards the door, his intentions clear, until Gabe's sudden shove sent him crashing to the ground, his head colliding with the nearby wooden table with a sickening thud, momentarily disorienting him. "You're going to get us killed," Gabe yelled. "This door does not open." Gabe turned away, his gaze fixed on Melody, who persisted in her futile attempts to force the stubborn door open with frantic banging and shouts. Meanwhile, Wesley struggled to regain his bearings, his hand instinctively reaching to the source of warmth trickling down his temple. The sensation of blood only fueled his anger, and with a grimace, he seized the small wooden table beside him and advanced towards Gabe. Wesley swung the makeshift weapon like a seasoned wrestler wielding a folding chair in the ring. The impact reverberated through the room as the table struck Gabe squarely on the back of his head, sending him crumpling to the ground in a motionless heap. For a fleeting moment, Wesley stood frozen, stunned by his own actions, but the urgent clamor of Melody's voice snapped him back to reality. "Wesley," her voice called out. He quickly made his way to the door, his hands trembling slightly as he fumbled with the lock, finally managing to release it and allow Melody entry. Together, they slammed the door shut and secured it just as 3 zombies lunged towards them, their forceful banging echoing through the room. They stood in tense silence, witnessing the creature's transition from pounding against the door to abruptly darting away when they spotted another unfortunate soul running by. "Pull the curtains," Melody commanded. Wesley nodded, his movements brisk as he complied. As he stepped back, his heart still pounding from the adrenaline-fueled encounter, Wesley nearly stumbled over Gabe, who lay writhing on the ground in evident agony. A pained groan escaped Gabe's lips, amplified when Melody delivered a swift kick to his shin. "You son of a bitch. Lay there and bleed," she spat, her disdain for him on full display as she turned away from Gabe and approached Wesley, who sat in stunned silence, blood still trickling from his head wound. "Sit down, Wesley. It's okay, we're safe now," Melody reassured him, her tone softening as she tore a strip of fabric from her dress and tended to his injury, pressing his hand over the makeshift bandage. "Just hold that there until the bleeding stops," she instructed, her gaze warm with gratitude. "Thank you, Melody." "No, thank you, Wesley. If you hadn't acted, I'd be dead," Melody said. Wesley chuckled softly, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "Truth be told, I've wanted to do that to him for a while now." Melody chuckled in response, offering a comforting pat on his shoulder. "I understand. Now, do you have any idea what in the holy hell is going on?" Wesley furrowed his brow in thought before shaking his head. "I don't, but I think James does." Nodding in agreement, Melody made her way to the back room, retrieving a radio and tuning it in. "James, it's Melody. Do you copy?" she called out. After several attempts, a crackling response finally came through. "Melody, what's happening down there?" James' voice crackled through the static. The train rolled in, and all hell broke loose. Chapter 5. A heavy silence hung over the airwaves as James absorbed the reality relayed to him. When he finally mustered the strength to speak, his voice carried a defeated tone. "Did Wesley make it?" he inquired. "Yeah, he's here. Saved my life in the process," Melody responded. "Anybody else?" James asked. "It's just us 2 and Gabe in the office. Although he might not live too much longer if I get my way. The bastard locked me out of the office, Melody replied bitterly. How did you get in? James inquired. Wesley cracked him over the head with a table. Melody explained matter-of-factly. Can Wesley hear me? James asked. Melody nodded, stepping over to Wesley and holding out the walkie-talkie so he could listen in. Yeah, you're good, she confirmed, her eyes meeting Wesley's as James' voice crackled through the device once more. I'm totally adding that move to my pitch, James remarked, a hint of humor breaking through the tension. Wesley's lips curled into a smile, offering a thumbs up in response, though Melody looked on, puzzled by the exchange. Do I even want to know? She interjected. Told him that I'd put in a good word with Anna for him, James explained, prompting Melody to roll her eyes. Oh my God, she exclaimed, shaking her head in disbelief. Don't judge, he's young and shy. James defended himself. It's not that. I mean, what you're doing is a little gross, but that's another point. We need to call Anna and Carson to warn them, Melody said. My phone is back in the office. Should be in the lockers, James said. Melody wasted no time, darting over to James' locker and flinging it open and grabbing the phone. What's the code? 1313, James said. Melody put the code in, unlocking the phone. Got it. I'm calling her now, Melody announced, her fingers flying over the screen as she located Anna's contact and initiated the call. We'll be here, James said. Setting the walkie-talkie down beside her, Melody focused her attention on the phone, her heart pounding in anticipation as the call connected. Hey James, what's up? Anna said. Anna, it's Melody, she began. Is James okay? Anna interjected. Yeah, he's fine. Where are you and Carson? Melody asked. We just got up to campus. There was some traffic, lots of cops out and about, so we're running behind. We should be back in an hour or so, Anna replied. Don't, Melody interrupted abruptly, her words hanging heavy in the air. A pregnant pause followed, tension mounting as Anna processed Melody's cryptic warning. You want to elaborate on that a bit, or should I just take offense to that? Anna asked. People are going crazy here. There's a lot of people dead, Melody said. Another long silence stretched between them, Melody's words sinking in. If you're trying to scare us, Melody, there are better ways, Anna finally responded. Hang on, Melody replied tersely. Melody approached the curtains, parting them slightly and carefully placing the phone within their folds. With a swift motion, she captured an image of the horrific scene outside. A street littered with lifeless bodies, surrounded by a horde of grotesque creatures tearing into flesh with savage abandon. Sending the photo over, she awaited Anna's response. Check the picture I just sent you, Melody said. After a brief pause, Anna's startled yelp pierced the air. Is this a joke? No, girl, it is not, Melody responded firmly. Wesley and I are trapped in the office with Gabe. James is out there somewhere. I don't know who else is still alive. Anna listened intently to what Melody said, realizing that there wasn't a hint of laughter or amusement. Okay, Melody, I believe you. What are we supposed to do? Anna asked. I don't know. We don't know what's happening, only that it's not a good place to be, Melody admitted. Ask her if anything is going on out there, Wesley interjected, prompting Melody to relay his question to Anna. Is there anything going on out there? Melody asked. Like what? Anna responded. People trying to kill each other with their teeth, Melody clarified. After a momentary pause, Anna replied, Nothing like that. Okay, you get someplace safe, Melody instructed. Do you want us to call the police? Anna offered. No, I'll take care of it. Because we're not going anywhere anytime soon, Melody said. Okay, you be safe. As soon as we're someplace safe, we'll call, Anna promised. We'll be here, Melody said. As Anna ended the call, she glanced over at her coworker Carson, both of them embodying the essence of youthful rebellion with their striking appearances. Carson sported long, dark hair, while Anna rocked a pixie cut, their bodies adorned with an array of tattoos. "Is everything okay?" Carson inquired. "No, apparently there were some killings at the park," Anna replied solemnly. "Jesus. Killings as in plural?" Carson's eyes widened in shock. "Yeah. Melody didn't say how many, but based on the picture she sent me, it's a lot," Anna explained as she pulled up the photo on her phone and showed it to Carson, who let out a low groan of disbelief. "That almost doesn't look real," Carson remarked. "Apparently it is," Anna responded, her gaze fixed on the haunting image before them. "So what do we do?" Carson asked. "We're at the main bar strip. Let's cruise down it, then go find someplace to lie low," Anna suggested. "We can always head back to my place," Carson said in a poor attempt at charm. "Not interested, Carson," Anna retorted, her tone sharp. "And it's a little disturbing that I show you pictures of dead people and the first thought that pops into your head is trying to get into my pants." "That should tell you how hot you are," Carson quipped, a smirk playing on his lips. Rolling her eyes in exasperation, Anna pointed to the turn ahead. "Just drive." Carson's smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern as they approached the scene unfolding near the bar. Police cars and an ambulance crowded the area in front of the building. He slowed the car, eager to get a closer look at the commotion. As they drew nearer, their apprehension grew. Two officers grappled with a handcuffed student, his struggles growing increasingly frantic. What caught Anna and Carson's attention, however, was the telltale sight of blood smeared around the man's mouth. "What the hell?" Carson muttered. "Something's not right," Anna said. In a sudden, horrifying turn of events, one of the officers lost his footing, slipping to the ground as he struggled to maintain his grip on the handcuffed man. In a swift, savage motion, the restrained figure twisted around and sank his teeth into the officer's exposed neck, tearing out a chunk of flesh. Anna and Carson recoiled in horror, their screams mingling with the chaos erupting before them. The officer's partner reacted, drawing his handgun and aiming it towards the ghoul as it charged towards him, still shackled at the wrists. The crack of gunfire filled the air as the officer opened fire. 3 shots rang out in rapid succession, each one landing center mass on the running creature. The ghoul charged relentlessly, undeterred by the officer's gunfire. With each shot, it seemed to gain momentum, closing in on the officer with terrifying speed. Yet, just as it reached him, the officer deftly sidestepped, using the creature's own force to send it sprawling to the ground. Turning quickly, the officer aimed his weapon once more, firing a fatal shot at the ghoul's head. As it crumpled to the ground, the officer remained vigilant, keeping his gun trained on the motionless figure to ensure it was truly defeated. Anna's gaze shifted to the fallen officer, who began to stir once more. "Carson," she called urgently. "I can't believe what we just witnessed," Carson exclaimed. "Carson," Anna repeated, trying to get his attention. "It's like something out of an action movie." Carson continued, seemingly oblivious to Anna's urgency. "Carson," Anna interrupted, pointing to the fallen officer who was now rising to his feet. Without hesitation, Anna slammed on the horn, the blaring sound grabbing the attention of the other officer just in time for him to see his colleague lunging towards him. "Oh my God," Anna gasped as they watched helplessly as the fallen officer sank his teeth into his partner, the two of them locked in a gruesome struggle. "I don't think anywhere out here is safe," Anna whispered. But Carson remained fixated on the scene in front of them, almost as if he were enjoying the spectacle. Moments later, several patrons burst out of the nearby bar, followed by a bloodied paramedic in hot pursuit. "Get us out of here," Anna pleaded. "And go where?" Carson replied. "I don't know," Anna said frantically. "Just get us out of here." Carson threw the car into reverse, retreating from the chaotic scene. With a deft maneuver, he spun the vehicle around and floored the gas pedal, propelling them away from the bars at breakneck speed. Anna, still reeling from the shock of the encounter, could only sit in stunned silence as Carson navigated through the streets. "Where can we go? Where can we go?" Anna asked. Carson pondered for a moment before nodding decisively. "I know where we can go." "I swear to God. If you say your place," Anna retorted. "It's not my place. Just trust me," Carson reassured her. Anna nodded, her mind still reeling from the horror she had witnessed. A few minutes later, Carson pulled into a parking deck. He rolled down his window and swiped his card, granting them access. "A parking deck, really? This is your idea of a safe space?" Anna questioned incredulously. "It's for commuting students on the other side of campus from the housing. There's maybe 50 people in a 5-block radius," Carson explained. Anna considered his words for a moment before nodding in reluctant agreement. "This isn't a long-term solution." "I know, but I figured it would give us time to think," Carson replied. "Might as well make it a group effort," Anna remarked, pulling out her phone and dialing Melody's number. "Are you safe, girl?" Melody's voice came through the line almost immediately. "Relatively speaking. I think whatever is happening there is happening out here too," Anna replied. "I kind of figured. We tried every number we could think of, and we couldn't get any police to answer," Melody disclosed. "We just watched 2 of them die," Anna added. "Oh hell. There weren't that many of them up here to begin with," Melody lamented. "We don't know what to do, Melody. If this is happening everywhere up here, there's not going to be a safe place," Anna confessed. "Welcome to our boat," Melody replied. "So what are you guys going to do?" Anna inquired anxiously. "No clue. But give me a minute. I'm going to try and get James on the line," Melody said. Melody set the phone down, activating the speaker function before grabbing a radio. "James, I have Anna on speakerphone. If either of you can't understand what the other is saying, I can translate," she informed. "Copy that. Anna, you and Carson doing okay?" James's voice crackled through the radio. "Yeah, James. It's starting to get crazy out here too, and we don't know what to do," Anna responded. "Hey James, Carson here. Yeah man, we were kind of hoping someone down there had an idea," Carson chimed in. "Well, whatever it is, it better not involve a US getting out of the office. Because the streets are crawling with those things," Melody interjected. "Should we come back there?" Anna suggested. "Good luck getting past the welcoming committee," Melody replied dryly. "Maybe we could try and pick you up at the office?" Anna proposed. "In Carson's car." "Unlikely," Melody remarked. "We could always grab the shuttle bus out of the garage." "The keys are there," Carson offered. "Yeah, that might work. But then what? We're in the same situation, only mobile," Melody pondered. "Do you have any better ideas?" Anna inquired. After a long pause, James spoke up in a commanding tone. "Yeah, I have one," he declared. "Let's hear it then," Melody prompted. "Anna, you and Carson get back here, but park over by the convenience store across the highway. We're going to need eyes on the front gate," James instructed. "We can do that. But why?" Anna questioned. "So we know what we need to do to close them. We're going to take the park." Chapter 6. A heavy silence hung in the air as James's words settled over everyone. Finally, Melody broke the quiet, addressing both the radio and the phone to ensure everyone heard. "I'm sorry, there must be a bad connection. Because I swear I just heard you say that we're going to take the park," she stated incredulously. "That's exactly what we're going to do," James confirmed. "And just how in the hell do you propose we do that?" "There are hundreds of those people running around out there," Melody challenged. "It's a big park, so we can spread them out," James reasoned. "But what good does that do? We don't have any way to fight them. I mean, I have a piece of wood, so I might be able to take out a couple before I get swarmed. But based on what I saw out there, then you'd have to deal with me after they rip my throat out," Melody argued. "Melody's right, James. This is crazy," Carson chimed in. "The whole situation is crazy. But this is the best idea we have, James insisted. Another pause ensued, during which Melody exchanged a glance with Wesley, silently confirming their agreement with James's plan. "I'm still not buying it, James," Melody stated firmly. "Look, Melody, I'm not going to stop you or anybody else if you want to make a run for the cars. But I'm staying and going to try and take over the park. If what's happening here is happening out there too, then we're in the safest spot we can possibly be. The entire park is surrounded by an 8-foot tall metal fence with barbed wire at the top. And once we get that front gate closed, nothing is getting in unless we want it to," James reasoned. He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "There's plenty of food in here too, so if we're stuck here for a while, we're going to be well fed. But if you have a better idea, I'm all ears," James concluded. Melody pondered his words for a moment before nodding. "Anna, you see what's going on out there? What do you think?" she asked. "I think we'd much rather be inside the park than out here. We just heard a bunch of sirens go past us headed towards the bar district. So we're going to go ahead and make our way to the park," Anna replied confidently. "Be safe out there," James cautioned. "We will. I'll let you know when we're in position," Anna assured them. "And while they get here, you can enlighten us as to how you plan on fighting these things. They don't seem to be affected by pain. I cracked one in the head with my board, and it just knocked it to the side. If it didn't get distracted by someone else running by, I don't think I would have made it," Melody remarked, her voice filled with concern. "Well, I can tell you that headshots are the only way to bring them down. You're just going to have to hit them a little harder," James explained. "How do you know that headshots are the only thing that works?" Wesley interjected. "Because I pushed one of them into a tree and the branch went right through its gut. The thing didn't even react to it. No pain, no bleeding out. Just angry that it couldn't move," James said. Wesley let out a sigh of resignation as Melody picked up her plank of wood, which wasn't the sturdiest of weapons. "I don't know, James. If I hit any harder, this thing is going to break in half," Melody lamented. "Then we're just going to have to get you some better weapons," James replied. "What we need are guns," Wesley interjected. "Emma and I are over here with techs, so we do have ourselves a shooter," James said. "Well, that's a relief. Do we have enough bullets, though?" Melody inquired. "Hey gang, Tex here." Tex's voice came through the radio. "I have plenty of bullets, but as soon as I start shooting, those things are going to be coming my way. If we had wagons, I'd circle them up, but I don't think that's an option," Tex explained. "Plus, I don't know how we're going to be able to get over to you, so you're going to need to find something to defend yourself with until we get there," James added. "The saloon," Gabe suddenly spoke up. Melody and Wesley turned their attention to Gabe, who was sitting on the floor, nursing his bleeding head. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Gabe," Wesley greeted him dryly. "You hit me over the head with a goddamn table," Gabe retorted. Melody moved away from the radio and phone, confronting Gabe face to face, her voice sharp and commanding. "Yeah, because you were too much of a chicken shit to open the door for me. Now say what you have to say about the saloon, then shut your pie hole," Melody snapped. Gabe swallowed hard, recognizing the fury in Melody's eyes. He gave her a subtle nod before speaking again. "A few years ago, when we swapped out the Indians for bank robbers for cultural reasons," Gabe began. "Wait, can we even say Indians anymore?" Wesley interrupted. Gabe rolled his eyes in exasperation, shaking his head. "Fine, Native Americans. Anyway, when we phased them out, we had all of the props they used just sitting in storage. Rather than get rid of them, we put them on display in the saloon," Gabe continued. "So what?" "They're props," Melody countered. "Some of them are, yes, but Tex in his trick shooting used to have a Native American counterpart that was doing the same thing, but with tomahawks and arrows. And they were the real deal," Gabe revealed. Melody pondered the information for a moment before a smile crept onto her face. "I don't know about the arrows, but I think having a tomahawk would be good," Wesley suggested. "Is the bow good?" Melody inquired. Yeah, it was custom made with modern materials and just made to look vintage, Gabe confirmed. Melody nodded approvingly, which prompted a puzzled expression from Wesley. You know how to use a bow and arrow? Wesley asked incredulously. I was captain of the archery team in high school for 2 years, Melody revealed with a hint of pride. You had an archery team in high school? Wesley's eyebrows shot up in surprise. I did, Melody affirmed. I think it's safe to say that you went to a much better high school than I did, Wesley remarked with a chuckle. Melody chuckled in response before turning back to the radio. Hey James, we have a lead on some weapons, but not sure how we're getting over to the saloon. It's 3 doors down from us, and… Melody trailed off as she glanced out the window, observing the multitude of creatures roaming the streets. The streets are still packed with those things. Plus, even if we got over to the saloon, it's possible other survivors are in there and have it locked down, Melody reported. You're going to have to go in through the roof, James suggested. That would be great if I had a ladder to get up there, Melody retorted. There's a roof hatch inside the office there. It's back in the storage room, James informed her. That doesn't help any. The saloon is 3 doors down from us, and that's a hell of a gap between the buildings, Melody pointed out. There was a long pause before James spoke up again. That's right, you didn't work the last day of the season last year, did you? James recalled. No, I didn't. What does that have to do with anything? Melody questioned. Well, for all his faults, Gabe did a good job of rewarding us last year with a case of alcohol, James explained. And let's just say that when I get some drinks in me, I'm very open to dares. To make a long story short, it's possible to clear the gaps between the buildings. Melody let out a defeated sigh while shaking her head. We'll see about that, she muttered under her breath. So James, once we're armed, what are we going to do? Wesley inquired. You guys are going to sit tight while we figure out how we're going to pull those things away from the gate, James replied. Just then, Wesley's ears caught the faint sounds of a train whistle in the distance. His eyes widened as inspiration struck him. The train, Wesley exclaimed. What about it? Melody asked, curious. It's still running and should keep going until midnight. If they can get on it, they should have some protection from those things. Maybe they can make some noise and pull them away? Wesley proposed. There was a long pause as the group considered Wesley's suggestion. I think that might work. It's going to be dangerous as hell, but so is everything else we're going to be doing, James finally agreed. The storage shed, Gabe suddenly spoke up. What are you going on about? Melody questioned. The long-term storage shed on the other side of the park, Gabe explained. I wasn't aware that there was a storage building, Wesley admitted. Well, there is. It's away from all the attractions during the back end of the train ride, tucked away behind the trees, Gabe elaborated. What's in it? James inquired. I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure. Some of the stuff has been in there for years, but there might be something useful in there. Couldn't hurt to look, Gabe suggested. Okay, we'll head up there and check. Good call, Gabe, James acknowledged. So while you get that, we'll work our way over to the saloon, Melody proposed. Sounds good. Be safe and we'll be in touch, James concluded before the line went dead. Melody let out a sigh, then turned to Wesley and Gabe, motioning towards the storage room. Come on, you two. We need to get up to the roof, Melody urged. Wesley walked over, offering Gabe a hand up off the floor, but Gabe wasn't thrilled with the assistance. As he got to his feet, he yanked his arm away. I don't need your help, Gabe snapped. Melody heard the subtle anger in Gabe's voice, turning around and confronting him face to face. Gabe, I'm going to say this once. Drop your attitude right now. Wesley clocked you over the head for a good reason. I'm past it, he's past it, and you need to be too, Melody asserted sternly. Why? Gabe challenged. Because outside those doors are a whole mess of things that want us dead, and they don't care about your petty little squabbles, Melody retorted. Gabe thought about it for a moment, remaining silent. Now, as much as I loathe to admit it, we're going to need your help if we're going to get through this. So are you on board with us? Or am I going to have to push you off the roof when we get up there? Melody asked. Gabe stared at Melody intently, recognizing the anger in her eyes. He realized that her threat wasn't to be taken lightly. With a nod of agreement, he voiced his acceptance. Okay, I'm on board, Gabe declared. In a gesture of reconciliation, Gabe extended his hand to Wesley, who reciprocated with a handshake. No hard feelings, Gabe stated sincerely. Same, Wesley replied with a nod. Good. Now that that's out of the way, let's get up top and see what we're dealing with, Melody directed. Melody led the group to the back storage room, flicking on the light and scanning the roof. After a moment, she spotted the roof hatch near the back. Got it. Just need a way up there? Melody announced. Wesley looked around, spotting a mid-sized step ladder. He grabbed it and positioned it underneath the hatch before climbing up onto it. With his arms outstretched, he managed to reach the edge of the hatch, pushing it open. Hold that thing steady, Wesley instructed. Gabe and Melody nodded in unison as they each grabbed a side of the ladder, ensuring it remained steady as Wesley climbed up. Gripping the edge of the hatch, he pulled himself up onto the roof. He leaned back down, extending a hand to help the other two up onto the roof. Come on, let's get you up here too. Chapter 7. It took several minutes for Wesley to assist them up to the roof. Once they were all up top, they walked over towards the front of the building, peering down at the anarchy unfolding in the streets below. Mother of God, Gabe muttered in shock. The streets were teeming with dozens of creatures, some of whom were attempting to breach other buildings. A few bodies lay on the ground, struggling to rise, their legs missing significant amounts of flesh and muscle. One unfortunate creature managed to stagger to its feet, taking a single step towards a group of nearby ghouls before collapsing face first into a trash can. Come on, we have to get over to the saloon, Melody urged, striding towards the side of the building. However, Gabe and Wesley remained fixated on the horrific scene below until Melody snapped her fingers, jolting them back to reality. We don't have time to gawk. Come on, Melody insisted. The two men exchanged a nod of acknowledgement before following Melody to the side. Wesley let out a low whistle as he examined the gap between the two buildings, which seemed to push the limits of their capabilities. That's a hell of a jump, Wesley remarked. Gabe glanced down to the ground below, where a handful of creatures roamed aimlessly. Looks more promising than the landing if you miss, Gabe remarked dryly. Melody ignored their banter, instead focusing on the building adjacent to them, which sat about a foot lower than the ledge of the City Hall building they were on. She scanned the rooftop, her gaze landing on the air conditioning unit. That's the answer right there, Melody declared confidently. Melody walked over to the air conditioning unit, which sat about 3 feet off the roof. She pressed down on the top of it, noting its sturdy construction despite giving way slightly under her push. While the unit was a few feet away from the ledge, its added height made jumping the gap feasible. Melody stared at it for a moment, assessing her plan before nodding to herself and leaping up onto its top. Wesley quickly joined her side, extending his hand for support. Melody grasped it briefly, adjusting her footing until she felt stable. Thanks, Wesley, Melody acknowledged. You're not seriously going to jump off that thing, are you? Gabe interjected. I don't think I can make the jump ledge to ledge. But with the extra height, I should be able to make it across, Melody explained. I can go if you want, Wesley offered. Melody shook her head, determined to tackle the challenge herself. It's okay, Wesley. I can do this, Melody reassured him. Okay, what do you need us to do? Wesley asked. Melody paused for a moment, then waved her hand dismissively. Just back up a bit. And if you're religious, a prayer or two couldn't hurt, Melody quipped with a hint of humor. Wesley nodded and complied, giving Melody space to prepare. She positioned herself as far back on the air conditioning unit as possible, attempting to block out the unsettling sounds emanating from the street below. Taking a moment to gather her thoughts, she whispered words of encouragement to herself. "You can do this. Just plant that foot and push off as hard as you can. You got this," Melody repeated, steeling herself for the jump. Melody let out a huff before sprinting as hard as she could on top of the air conditioning unit, the metal popping down with each forceful step. As she reached the edge, she planted her foot perfectly and pushed off, propelling her body through the air. However, as she soared across the gap, Melody realized with growing panic that she was falling short. Her eyes widened as she reached out desperately towards the edge of the building. With a surge of effort, she managed to land right on the edge of the building with her gut. The impact knocked the wind out of her, leaving her gasping for breath, but she gritted her teeth and fought to maintain her grip. Her hands scrabbled for purchase on the ledge as she began to slip, prompting a muffled scream to escape her lips, the lack of air in her lungs preventing a full cry. "Melody, hang on," Wesley yelled out. Wesley rushed over to the edge of the building, peering down and spotting several creatures in the alleyway below, their attention drawn by the noise. They stared up at Melody and Wesley, their hunger evident in their eyes. Realizing the imminent danger, Wesley quickly retreated to the far edge of the rooftop, his eyes meeting Gabe's. Before Gabe could utter a word, Wesley cut him off. "Just shut your mouth and get out of the way," Wesley commanded. Gabe complied without hesitation, raising his hands in surrender before stepping back. Wesley let out a primal scream before sprinting as hard as he could along the rooftop. As he approached the edge, he planted his foot and pushed off with all his strength. To his astonishment, his effort proved sufficient to carry him across the gap. He reached out for the ledge, his foot finding purchase momentarily before slipping, causing him to land awkwardly on the roof. A cry of pain escaped Wesley's lips as his leg muscles protested against the impact. Despite the searing pain, he quickly rose to his feet, rushing over to Melody and gripping her arms tightly. Wesley exerted every ounce of strength he had, stabilizing Melody enough for her to regain her breath and climb up the side of the wall. Moments later, she collapsed onto the roof beside him, both of them lying on their backs, breathing heavily. After several silent moments, Melody rolled over and patted Wesley on the chest. "That was dangerous as hell, man," she remarked. "Yeah, well, you needed help, so I just went for it," Wesley replied. "Thank you," Melody said sincerely. Wesley nodded, wincing as he rubbed his legs, still throbbing from the impact. Melody helped him to his feet, and together they looked back over to Gabe, who remained alone on the roof. "If it's all the same to you, I think I'll stay here," Gabe called out. "That's probably a good idea. Keep an eye on the phone and radio," Melody instructed. Gabe nodded and disappeared back into the office to retrieve the devices. Meanwhile, Melody and Wesley turned to head towards the saloon. As they walked to the other side of the building they were on, they breathed a sigh of relief that the gap over to the next building was only a couple of feet. They hopped over and walked to the other side, their goal now in sight. The gap over to the saloon wasn't daunting, just a couple of feet. However, they could see a crowd of creatures outside the front door, trying to get inside. "Looks like they want to get in there for something," Wesley observed. "Probably some other survivors," Melody speculated. "Survivors, if we're lucky," Wesley added. Melody thought for a moment and nodded in agreement before making her way towards the front of the saloon, where a window offered a glimpse inside. Taking a knee to stay out of sight, she peered in, although the view was limited. The only thing she could see was that the front door was barricaded with tables and chairs. "How's it look?" Wesley inquired. "Somebody's definitely in there. That front door is locked up tight," Melody reported. "So how are we getting in?" Wesley asked. Melody shrugged, then hopped over the gap to the saloon building, with Wesley close behind. They reached the roof and began searching for a way in, eventually spotting a hatch on the far side. Approaching cautiously, they hesitated before the hatch, unsure of what they might find on the other side. "Get behind it. If one of those people is on the other side, I want you to jump on top of it," Melody said. Wesley nodded in acknowledgement and positioned himself behind the hatch as Melody cautiously opened it. They both held their breath, relieved to find nothing lurking inside except for a ladder leading down into a storage room. Descending quietly, They entered the saloon, leaving the hatch open for a swift exit if needed. Melody moved over to the door, a solid wooden barrier without a window, and pressed her ear against it to listen. There was no talking, only the sound of banging coming from another part of the building. She cautiously cracked the door open just a few inches, peering out to assess the situation. Several tables were overturned, and blood was splattered across the floor, prompting Melody to let out a defeated sigh. As she continued to observe, she noticed 3 creatures pounding against the bathroom door. Melody studied the scene for a moment, noticing the bathroom door shifting under the weight of the creatures. She turned to Wesley, whispering, "Someone's in the bathroom." Wesley nodded in acknowledgement as Melody opened the door a bit further, allowing her to stick her head out. She scanned the wall they were on and spotted the bow and a quiver of arrows about 10 yards away. Taking in the rest of the room, she confirmed that the 3 zombies were the only occupants. "I'm going for the arrows," Melody announced to Wesley. "Be careful," he cautioned. With a nod, Melody stepped out onto the main floor of the saloon, moving quietly along the wall while Wesley maintained watch from the door. It took her several tense moments, but she finally reached the display, silently retrieving the bow and grabbing a handful of arrows. Setting the spare arrows on the nearby table, she checked the weapon to ensure it was in good condition. "Here goes nothing," Melody murmured. Melody stood poised, her fingers taut against the bowstring, her eyes fixed on the distracted horde of zombies. In this dire moment, she found herself drawing comparisons to her days on the archery team. The zombies were only 20 yards away, which was considerably closer than the targets were during her archery team days. Despite the relative closeness, the tension was still high, because she knew if she missed, the targets would be charging at her, which never really happened during competitions. Melody steadied herself, aligning her sights with her target. She released the arrow, its flight swift and sure, finding its mark in the back of a zombie's head. The creature crumpled to the ground, defeated by her skill. Quickly, she readied another arrow, prepared for the inevitable onslaught. But to her relief, the other 2 zombies remained fixated on the saloon door, oblivious to her presence. Taking advantage of the reprieve, Melody focused on her next shot, each movement deliberate and calculated. With a steady hand, she released the arrow, watching as it struck true once more, felling another of the undead. However, her triumph was short-lived. As the fallen zombie's grasp tightened on its companion's shirt, spinning it around, Melody's heart sank. "Oh shit." The creature's frenzied moan pierced the air as it bolted toward Melody, its ghoulish form closing the distance with alarming speed. Panic surged through her veins as she fumbled to load another arrow, her hands shaking with adrenaline-fueled urgency. With trembling fingers, she drew the bowstring back, aiming for the oncoming threat. Her shot was true, but fate intervened as the creature stumbled over a chair, deflecting the arrow's trajectory just enough to miss its mark. Melody's wide eyes reflected a mix of fear and determination as she reached for another arrow, the ghoul drawing ever nearer. Just as the creature loomed dangerously close, a thunderous yell echoed from the storage room door. Melody's gaze snapped toward the source of the commotion, where Wesley's frantic screams and desperate pounding against the door drew the zombie's attention like a magnet. In a swift, desperate maneuver, Wesley slammed the door shut, the creature's momentum carrying it into a violent collision with the barrier. Melody seized the opportunity, quickly loading another arrow and taking aim. With a swift release, the arrow found its mark, burying itself in the side of the zombie's head. The creature slumped to the ground. With the immediate threat neutralized, Melody took a moment to catch her breath, her senses still on high alert. As she surveyed her surroundings for any lingering danger, she called out to her companions. "We're clear," she yelled out. Wesley exerted all his strength, pushing against the door until it budged, allowing him to slip through the narrow gap created by the zombie acting as an unwitting barricade. As he approached Melody, her arms enveloped him in a tight embrace, a gesture of gratitude and relief. "That's 3 times you've saved me." "Keep that up," Melody murmured. Wesley's cheeks flushed slightly at her praise, offering a nod of acknowledgement before they redirected their focus toward the bathroom across the room. Emerging from the confines of the bathroom were 3 individuals, all guests of the amusement park. Though their outward appearance was marred by blood and terror, they seemed physically unharmed. Is everyone all right? Melody inquired. Yeah, we're fine, the woman at the forefront replied, though her expression betrayed the trauma they had undoubtedly endured. Is anybody bitten? Melody pressed further, her gaze scanning the group for injury. The woman's eyes fell upon one of the men lying motionless on the ground, an arrow protruding from his head. Overwhelmed by grief, she collapsed to her knees, her sobs punctuating the grim reality of their situation. Just her husband and 2 other people, one of the men said as he stepped forward. Do you know what's going on? The other man asked. Not really, but we'll tell you what we know, Wesley offered. I'll fill them in if you want to get back on the roof so that Gabe can let us know what we're doing next, Melody suggested, her voice cracking a bit as she gestured to her bruised ribs. Do you want me to get you some ice first? Wesley offered. Melody offered a soft smile, declining his offer with a shake of her head. I got it, she assured him before he hurried off to the storage room to climb up top. Turning her attention back to the survivors, Melody's tone grew solemn as she delivered a warning. Y'all may want to sit down, because this is not going to be easy to hear. Chapter 8. Out at Tex's trick shoot location, James, Emma, and Tex found themselves surrounded by an array of boxes and cabinets filled with weapons and ammunition. The task of sorting through the supplies was proving to be a time-consuming endeavor. What do we have as far as weapons go? James inquired, his gaze sweeping over the assortment of armaments. I got my 2 6-shooters on my hips and my lever-action .22 rifle, Tex replied, his voice resonating with confidence. Are .22s going to get the job done for headshots? James pressed. As long as I get it at the right angle, it'll do the job, Tex reassured. Emma joined the conversation, setting down a full box of ammunition she had retrieved. This is all I could find over there, she reported, her contribution met with Tex's approving nod. I believe that will work just fine, miss, Tex acknowledged, breaking open a box of .22 ammunition and beginning to load his rifle. How many does that thing hold? Emma inquired. 15 shots in this bad boy. And with the lever action. Tex trailed off, demonstrating the speed of his reloading technique with practiced efficiency. This beauty can move just as fast as I can. We're lucky to have you, Tex, Emma remarked. Far be it from me to disagree with a pretty lady, Tex quipped, flashing Emma a charming wink before returning his focus to the task at hand. James approached, bearing a large cardboard box brimming with ammunition. It doesn't look like ammunition is going to be much of an issue. The time to use it, however, may be, he said. We'll figure it out, Emma reassured. Now, this is an important question. Do either of you know how to use a gun? Tex interjected, his gaze shifting between James and Emma. James shook his head, admitting, closest I ever came to firing a gun was in the video arcade on some of those games. And even then, I wasn't all that good. Tex nodded, directing James to a small wooden cabinet tucked away in the corner, its top obscured by blankets. Open that one up over there and pick you out something you're comfortable with, Tex instructed, his tone encouraging. James complied, making his way to the cabinet to clear off its contents. Meanwhile, Tex turned his attention to Emma. And what about you, miss? He queried. I used to go range shooting with my dad a few times a year, Emma revealed. I wasn't the greatest shot in the world, but if one of those things got close enough to me, I should be able to hit it. Tex's smile widened as he glanced around the floor, retrieving a holster with a single 6-shooter. Handing it over to Emma, he remarked, You might have to pull that holster tight, but it should fit you. Emma nodded appreciatively, adjusting the holster to her size before drawing the 6-shooter. She examined it closely before deftly spinning the cylinder and snapping it into place, a practiced gesture that earned a nod of approval from Tex. As they loaded up their weapons and holsters, Emma continued the conversation. Tex, can I ask you something? She began. Anything you like, miss, Tex replied. How in the world did you even get into this? Emma inquired. You mean being a cowboy trick shooter? Tex clarified, a hint of pride in his voice. Well, miss, the truth is that I come from a long line of cowboy trick shooters, all the way back to my great-grandpappy." "Really? That's incredible," Emma marveled. Before Texas could delve further into his family history, James interjected from across the room, his voice echoing as he rummaged through the box of supplies. "Come on, Tex, that's a great story." "But you're not performing tonight," James remarked. Tex let out a resigned sigh, turning to face James. "You just can't let me live the fantasy, can you, James?" After a moment's consideration, James relented, nodding in agreement. "You know what, Tex? You're right. As long as you keep shooting like you're from a long line of cowboy trick shooters, I'm good with it." Tex acknowledged James with a nod before shifting his attention to Emma, who offered him a warm smile. "I bet you have some great stories about your family," Emma remarked. "Oh, you better believe it," Tex replied, a glint of pride in his eyes. However, before he could regale them with tales of his lineage, James approached, bearing a collection of wooden bludgeons and knives. "It's going to have to wait," James announced, setting the weapons down beside the ammunition. "It looks as though you found a lot to like over there," James, Tex said. "We're all going to need it. I figured that we needed to stay quiet while we're going to the storage building, so you two may want to grab something too," James explained. Tex and Emma nodded in agreement, each selecting a knife and a wooden bludgeon. With their makeshift arsenal in hand, they prepared to follow James's lead. As James surveyed the moonlit landscape outside, he noted some movement in the distance around the tree line. "Does this place have a back door?" he asked. "No, but it's got a window that's plenty big," Tex replied. "Then we're heading out that way as soon as you two are ready to go," James declared. While James ventured to the back of the building to ensure the coast was clear, Tex and Emma finished loading up all the ammunition they could carry, leaving behind a surplus on the table. When Emma reached for more, Tex shook his head. "Don't worry, little lady, we'll be fine with what we got on us. This stuff isn't going anywhere," he assured her. With their preparations complete, Tex grabbed his cowboy hat, leading Emma to the back room where James was quietly opening the window. Before they stepped out into the night, James addressed them both. "We're heading straight back through the woods, then cutting up north. We're going to be close to the bank robbery scene, so some of those things may have wandered out when the doors opened," James explained. "Don't worry, we'll be ready for them," Tex asserted, holding up his bludgeon with a confident nod. "Here we go," James declared. James took the lead, stepping out of the window with his weapon poised and ready. He scanned both sides of the building, his heart pounding in his chest as he searched for any signs of danger. With a wave of his hand, he signaled for Tex and Emma to follow, relieved to find the immediate vicinity clear. As the trio hurried toward the tree line, their pace quickening with each step, a lone zombie emerged from the shadows, its undead gaze fixated on them. James instinctively moved to confront the threat, but Tex intervened, guiding him back with a reassuring gesture. "Don't worry," James began to say, but Tex silenced him with a nod of assurance. With remarkable agility, Tex stepped forward, launching his bludgeon at the approaching creature with precision. The wooden weapon struck its mark, connecting with the zombie's legs and sending it tumbling to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, Tex closed the distance, retrieving a knife from his boot and plunging it into the back of the creature's head. He maintained his grip on the blade until the undead assailant lay motionless, its threat extinguished. As Emma and James approached, impressed by Tex's display of skill, he retrieved his knife and wooden weapon with ease. "That was an impressive move," Emma remarked. "A cowboy has to be versatile if he wants to survive," Tex replied with a playful wink, prompting an eye roll from James. As they navigated through the dense foliage, their movements masked but not entirely silent, James suddenly detected movement ahead, prompting him to signal for the group to halt. They listened intently, their senses attuned to the faint but unmistakable sounds of several ghouls moaning in the distance. Though they couldn't ascertain the exact number, it was evident that the undead horde outnumbered them, posing a threat too great to confront head-on. James motioned for a retreat, but Tex had a different plan in mind. Spotting a decent-sized rock at his feet, he seized it and, with a practiced motion, hurled it deep into the woods. Moments later, the sound of the rock colliding with a tree echoed through the forest, followed shortly thereafter by the shuffling footsteps of the undead as they diverted their attention to the source of the disturbance. Tex exchanged a nod with James, who resumed leading them through the trees. Eventually, they emerged into a vast clearing, the distant train tracks visible just 50 yards away. "Come on, it's just on the other side there," James urged. The trio quickened their pace, the soft grass muffling the sound of their footsteps as they closed in on their destination. Within moments, they reached the tracks, effortlessly leaping over them and making their way to the storage building. James wasted no time, approaching the front door with purpose. Retrieving his knife, he expertly maneuvered it between the door and the frame, deftly manipulating the mechanism until the door yielded to his efforts with a satisfying click. As he flicked on the light, the interior of the building was revealed, a multitude of boxes strewn haphazardly along the walls, with a clear line delineating the center of the room. "Emma, keep watch at the door. Tex, give me a hand. Let's see what we can find," James instructed. As James and Tex combed through the dimly lit room, inspecting each box with a mixture of anticipation and frustration, James's patience began to wear thin. Box after box yielded nothing but clothing and holiday decorations, eliciting a frustrated sigh from him. "Damn it, Gabe. This isn't helping," James muttered under his breath. Tex, however, remained undeterred, his keen eye catching something promising amidst the mundane contents of the storage room. "Before you lose all hope, buckaroo, you may want to see what I found," Tex called out. James followed Tex to the back of the building, rounding the corner onto the back aisle. His frustration melted away, replaced by a grin of pure delight as he laid eyes on their discovery. "Oh, now we're talking. Does it work?" James exclaimed eagerly. Tex nudged a box at his feet with a confident smirk. "It looks like everything we need is in there." James wasted no time, stepping closer to the box and placing his hand on top of the small cannon nestled within. His smile widened as he envisioned the possibilities. "This should be fun." Chapter 9. Tex and James rolled the small cannon out into the moonlit night, the silver glow casting an eerie sheen over their makeshift arsenal. Tex carried the box of materials for the cannon, his experienced eyes scanning over its contents. "I don't think we're going to be able to shoot anything out of it, but it looks like we have what we need to make one heck of a racket," Tex observed, his tone practical yet hopeful. "We can make that work," James replied confidently. A distant train whistle pierced the night air, signaling the approaching locomotive. "Looks like our ride is here," Tex remarked, his gaze shifting toward the tracks. "We're going to have to catch it on the run. Is everybody good with that?" James asked. "I don't know if I can do that, James," Emma admitted. "It's all right. This is what I want you to do. Get inside that storage building, lock it up, and see what else you can find that might help us," James instructed. Emma nodded in understanding, obeying his directive and retreating into the safety of the storage building. As James and Tex approached the tracks, they positioned themselves on opposite sides, preparing for the daring maneuver ahead. "You ever done this before?" Tex inquired, his gaze meeting James's with a knowing look. 2 seasons ago on the last day, James confessed. "Let me guess, more dare drinking?" Tex speculated, a wry grin quirking his lips. "Yep, not my proudest moment, but I did it," James admitted with a sheepish smile. "It happens to the best of us, partner," Tex remarked, offering a reassuring nod. "So what's the plan?" James inquired. "That back door should be shut tight. We're going to catch onto the back car, survey the situation, and go from there," Tex explained. "All right, I'll follow your lead," James said. Tex and James braced themselves as the train approached, the thunderous roar of the engine accompanied by a fierce gust of wind. As the locomotive barreled past them, they turned and began running alongside it, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they struggled to keep pace. Though the train wasn't moving at breakneck speed, it still proved challenging for them to match its momentum. As the final train car drew near, they focused their attention on the back landing with its sturdy railing. With synchronized precision, both men seized hold of the railing as it swept past them, using its momentum to propel themselves forward. With a concerted effort, they launched themselves upward, planting their feet firmly on the back of the train. It took a moment of exertion, but they managed to clamber over the back gate, finally landing safely on the back portion of the train car. Leaning against the back wall, they remained still, avoiding detection from anything lurking within. Tex gestured for James to stay quiet, his hand raised in a silent command, before cautiously approaching the window to peer inside. Though he said nothing, James could sense the horror reflected in Tex's expression, the color draining from his face as he surveyed the scene within. Taking a moment to compose himself, Tex looked again, his gaze met with a sight of pure carnage. Blood splattered across the interior, with 5 grotesque figures shuffling aimlessly through the aisle. As the creatures shuffled aimlessly through the train car, their attention seemingly fixated on nothing in particular, Tex surveyed the scene with a cautious eye. With the ambient noise from the tracks providing cover, he leaned in close to James, speaking in a hushed tone. "When I give you the signal, I want you to pull that door open," Tex instructed, his voice low but firm. James cautiously peered through the window, observing the grotesque figures within. He shook his head in apprehension. "It's too dangerous. Just shoot them through the glass," James suggested. "That ain't sporting. Besides, the glass is going to make my bullets go everywhere." "I need a clean shot," Tex countered. Though hesitant, James met Tex's serious gaze and nodded in reluctant agreement. With a deep breath, he placed his hand on the door, signaling his readiness. With a swift motion, James yanked the door open, granting Tex entry into the train car. Without hesitation, Tex stepped through, drawing his 6-shooter with practiced ease. In one fluid motion, he fanned the hammer, sending a round straight into the head of the nearest creature. The force of the shot blew out the back of its skull, coating nearby seats in a spray of crimson. The sudden noise caught the attention of the other creatures, who let out furious groans before rushing towards Tex. James watched in awe as Tex effortlessly dispatched the advancing horde, his expert marksmanship neutralizing the threat within seconds. The now brainless creatures lay in a heap on the ground, their lifeless forms a testament to Tex's skill with a firearm. Before the smoke had even cleared from his 6-shooter, Tex swiftly holstered it and drew his rifle, keeping it trained on the door to the next train car. Despite the pressing mass of undead on the other side, the door held firm under their assault. "We're good," Tex declared, his tone steady as he maintained his vigilance. James joined Tex near the door, his admiration for his companion's marksmanship evident in his expression. "That's some good shooting, Tex." "Come on, let's get up to the next door," James suggested. Following Texas's lead, they navigated through the aisle, carefully stepping over the fallen bodies. James gripped his bludgeon tightly, prepared for any potential threats that may still linger within the car. Fortunately, they found none. As they approached the next door, Tex lowered his weapon, his gaze fixed on the trio of zombies attempting to force their way through the glass. Peering through the smeared blood on the window, Tex's keen eyes discerned the presence of a dozen more creatures within the next car. "That's going to be a problem right there," Tex remarked, his voice carrying concern as he reloaded his 6-shooter. "They're pressed up against the glass pretty good. I know it's not sporting, but it might be the safest option," James said. Tex nodded towards the door hinges, which were visibly buckling under the weight of the 3 zombies pressing against it. "Yep, partner, that might work. Or if we draw a few more of those varmints to the door, it snaps it right off the hinges," Tex said as he motioned towards the weak spot. James scrutinized the door hinges for a moment before nodding in agreement. "So what's the play?" he asked. "When I started here all those years ago, do you know what I signed up for?" Tex began. "No clue," James admitted. "I was one of the Native American warriors," Tex revealed, prompting a skeptical look from James, who noted Tex's unmistakably white appearance. "No offense, Tex, but I've seen bleached teeth that were less white than you. How in the world were you a Native American warrior?" James questioned incredulously. "It was a different time back then. Plus, I was the only one crazy enough to get on top of the train and scare the passengers from the outside," Tex explained with a grin, his eyes glinting mischievously. James paused, processing Tex's revelation before shaking his head in amusement. "You're a crazy person, Tex," he remarked with a chuckle. "And don't you forget it." "Now come on, I'm going to need your help," Tex replied. James nodded in understanding as he followed Tex over to the window at the front of the train car. Together they worked to lower it, the rush of wind immediately assaulting their faces as Tex examined the exterior. Despite the train's moderate speed, the risk was very present for Tex. One wrong move could send him tumbling underneath the train, but he knew it was a risk he had to take. As Tex poked his head outside, he spotted the small silver handholds a few feet above the windows. From a distance, they appeared to be mere decorations, but up close, they were essential to Tex's plan. "Good, they're still up there," Tex remarked, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. He retrieved his rifle and handed it over to James. "It's just in case, partner. If that door starts to go, unload on them and we'll hope for the best," Tex instructed. James nodded as Tex began to climb out of the window. Tex maneuvered himself onto the exterior of the train, carefully navigating across to the adjacent car and positioning himself outside the window. From his vantage point, Tex had a clear view of the interior of the train car, where he observed nearly a dozen ghouls prowling about. His concern deepened upon noticing that the other door was also open, obscuring his view of any potential threats within. Meanwhile, James called out from the window. "How are we looking?" James asked. "The door to the front car is open, so as soon as I start shooting, I want you to unload on them, you hear?" Tex replied. "You got it," James affirmed. James positioned himself in front of the door inside the train car, his rifle raised and aimed directly at the nearest creature's head. "I go when you go, Tex," James said. Meanwhile, Tex maintained a tight grip on the handhold outside the train, a six-shooter in hand. With a swift motion, he withdrew his leg and delivered a powerful kick, shattering the window and sending glass raining down onto the seat below. The noise agitated the ghouls inside the train car, but Tex remained unfazed. Carefully, he extended his gun through the broken window, cocking back the hammer before squeezing the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the car as the bullet tore through the head of a zombie in the aisle, dropping it lifeless to the ground and creating a makeshift barricade of bodies. Tex repeated the action, dispatching another creature with precision aim. Outside, Tex's methodical marksmanship bought them precious time, as James unleashed a barrage of bullets upon the creatures pressing against the door. He quickly pumped 3 rounds into them, neutralizing the immediate threat. As the ghouls slumped to the ground, James shifted his attention to the other train car, observing Tex's methodical precision as he dispatched the undead with deadly accuracy. Despite the lack of rapid fire, each shot found its mark with chilling efficiency. Suddenly, James heard Tex's urgent yell from outside the train, though the words were lost in the din. Reacting swiftly, James rushed to the window, leaning out to hear Tex's message. "I'm out. You have to hold them off until I'm back in there." Tex's voice rang out. James hurried back to the door, rifle raised and aimed at the approaching mob of ghouls from the front car. Panic gripped him as he realized the sheer number of adversaries bearing down on him, easily a dozen of them. "Oh my God!" James exclaimed. He fired a couple of shots at the closest ghoul, but his aim faltered, hitting the torso instead of the head. Steadying himself, James waited until the creature was nearly at the door before firing again. Unfortunately, his aim proved to be his downfall once more. The bullet struck the creature in the mouth, propelling it forward with renewed momentum. The impact dislodged the top hinge of the door, causing it to stick halfway open. The ghoul lashed out at James, its grotesque form slamming into him and forcing him to stagger backward, his grip on the rifle faltering under the onslaught. As James struggled to regain his footing, the ghoul burst through the partially open door, hurtling towards him with terrifying speed. Before James could react, a gunshot pierced the air, originating from the window where Tex had re-entered the train car, hitting the ghoul in the side of the head before it could reach James. Rapidly reloading his six-shooter, Tex fired off another shot that found its mark, striking a zombie in the side of the head, trapping it in between the broken door and frame. "Rifle," Tex called out urgently. James turned towards the door, where several more creatures were pressing against it, their combined weight threatening to shatter it entirely. With a quick nod, James tossed the rifle over, and Tex caught it deftly, immediately assuming a firing stance. In one fluid motion, Tex unleashed a barrage of 4 shots, each finding its target with deadly precision. The zombies at the door were dispatched, their bodies slumping into the gap between the door and the frame. Tex maneuvered over a couple of seats, positioning himself in the aisle to peer through the window. His keen eyesight detected several more ghouls converging on their location. Tex's precision with the rifle was nothing short of astounding as he systematically mowed down the approaching zombies, each shot finding its mark with deadly accuracy. James stood in awe, watching as Tex effortlessly dispatched the entire horde within the train car in a matter of moments. As the last echoes of gunfire faded, Tex seamlessly reloaded his rifle, his movements fluid and practiced. Without missing a beat, he remained vigilant, his focus unwavering as he scanned the area for any remaining threats. Minutes ticked by in tense silence, until finally it became apparent that the immediate danger had passed. "We're clear," James announced, a sense of relief washing over him. With a nod from Tex, they made their way through the car, stepping over the pile of corpses that littered the aisle. Moving swiftly, they reached the front of the train, where James grabbed hold of a radio. "Melody, do you copy? We just took the train." Chapter 10. As James and Tex stood in the engine room, awaiting a response over the radio, tension hung heavy in the air. After several moments of anxious silence, James made another attempt to reach Melody. "Melody, do you copy? Tex and I just took the train," James repeated into the radio. Finally, a crackle of static broke the silence, and a voice came through the radio. "Hey James, it's Gabe. That's good news about the train," Gabe responded. Confusion flooded James at the sound of Gabe's voice. "Gabe? Where the hell is Melody?" James asked. "Relax, James. She's just fine. She's over in the saloon gathering up weapons. Wesley's with her, along with 3 park visitors," Gabe said. With a sigh of relief, James pressed on. "So what's the situation there?" "Main Street is still packed with those things, and I'm pretty sure there are other survivors in some of the buildings," Gabe reported. "How can you tell?" James questioned. "I'm no expert on whatever these things are, but there's several groups of them trying to break down the doors. I don't think they're doing that just because they can," Gabe explained. James nodded in understanding. "Yeah, fair enough, but they're going to have to wait until we secure the front gate. Have you heard from Anna yet?" he inquired, concern evident in his voice. "Not yet," Gabe responded. "That's starting to worry me," James admitted. "I can call her if you want," Gabe offered. "Wait until we're done and then go for it," James instructed. "Did you make it to the storage shed?" Gabe inquired. "Yeah, that was a good call. Emma is still back there going through it, but we did find a cannon," James replied. "I completely forgot about that thing. We used to set that off at the end of the day to signal we were closing," Gabe recalled. "Well, that's fitting, because we're going to use it to close those gates for good," James declared. "What are you thinking?" Gabe asked. James checked his watch, noting it was nearly 10 o'clock. "We should have 4 more passes with the train before it shuts down for the night, and I intend on using it. We're going to ride it back out to the storage shed and prep the cannon, then set it off on the next pass and ride it back while those things hopefully take the bait," James said. "That's not a bad plan. But what do we do then? We can't just let them wander around in the park," Gabe said. "We're going to pull them back to Main Street, but only when we're ready for them," James assured. "Okay, it's your show, James. Just let me know what you need," Gabe said. James shared a glance with Tex, both surprised by Gabe's compliance. Gabe falling in line behind someone else? That's the strangest thing I've seen all day. And that's saying something, Tex remarked, breaking the tension with a chuckle. James laughed before refocusing on the radio. "We're going to be setting off the cannon before 11, so do everything you can to get in touch with Anna," he said. "You got it. Anything else?" Gabe asked. James pondered for a moment before realizing a potential issue. "Yeah, are you still at City Hall?" he inquired. Yeah, I'm on the roof, but I can get back down. What do you need? Gabe said. We're going to be pulling into the station in just a few minutes, and that whistle is going to pull those things in our direction. Do you have any way to cause a distraction? James asked. Gabe paused, considering the request before a grin spread across his face. Yeah, James, I got just the thing. Hit me up when you get the cannon ready, he said. You got it, Gabe, James replied. Gabe stowed the radio in his pocket before hurrying back towards the roof hatch. As he departed, Wesley's voice echoed in the background, seeking information. Was that James? What did he say? Wesley called out. Give me a minute. Gabe shouted back. Gabe carefully descended the ladder, making sure not to lose his footing. Once on solid ground, he entered his office, settling into his chair and opening a small cabinet containing a microphone and a switch. With a flick of the switch, the loudspeakers scattered around Main Street powered on, emitting a bit of feedback due to their age. Clearing his throat, Gabe spoke into the microphone, his voice projected throughout the area. To everybody out there who can hear me, my name is Gabe and I'm the manager of this park. As I am sure you are all very well aware, something has gone horribly wrong tonight. If you are locked inside a building, I urge you to stay there. We are actively working on the problem, but if you attempt to escape, it could make our jobs all the more difficult. So please, sit tight. Pausing briefly, Gabe heard the distant sound of the train whistle. Now, for those of you who have sensitive hearing, or for those who do not wish to be deafened, I suggest that you cover your ears for the next couple of minutes, because this is going to be unpleasant. Placing one finger in his ear and pressing the other against his shoulder, Gabe positioned the microphone near a small speaker, generating a piercing feedback. The high-pitched whine reverberated throughout Main Street, overpowering all other sounds. Wesley instinctively covered his ears as he observed the creatures below. While some continued to pound on doors, others frantically searched for the source of the noise. None of them scattered away. Wesley turned to see the train pulling into the station, its arrival unnoticed by the creatures amidst the cacophony. If you're on there, I hope you guys are safe, Wesley murmured. Inside the front engine, James and Tex stood with the door cracked open, peering back into the first train car. Tex aimed his rifle, while James gripped his wooden bludgeon tightly. They winced at the deafening noise reverberating off every surface in the train as it came to a halt. Holding their breath, they cautiously observed as the doors opened. To their immense relief, only two ghouls ambled in, scanning the car for any signs of movement. Tex kept them in his sights, unwilling to reveal their position until the doors were sealed shut. After a tense few minutes, the doors finally closed, and the train resumed its journey. Go, go, James urged, prompting Tex to act without hesitation. Rising from his position, Tex stepped through the door and rapidly dispatched the creatures with well-placed shots to their heads. Standing his ground momentarily as they pulled away from Main Street, Tex ensured the coast was clear. As the feedback sound dissipated, he let out a sharp whistle from the front of the train. If we have any stowaways, now would be the time to show yourself, Tex called out, his voice carrying through the carriages. In the distance, a moan and footsteps drew closer, followed by a creature dressed as an Old West bartender bursting through the door. Tex acted swiftly, taking down the creature without hesitation before standing his ground for another minute. Meanwhile, James checked the monitors, finding no signs of further movement. We're clear, Tex, James confirmed. Tex set down his rifle, approaching the bartender's body. James followed suit. Did you know that boy? Tex inquired. I did. He was a good kid, James replied solemnly. When all this is over, we're giving them all a proper burial, Tex declared. I'm with you, Tex. I'm with you, James affirmed. As they continued their journey around the park, Gabe was interrupted by the ringing phone in the office. Fumbling with it, he answered. Anna, is that you? Gabe asked. Gabe? Where's Melody? Anna asked. Why does everybody keep asking that? She's fine. She's over at the saloon. Where are you? Gabe responded. Carson and I are across the street at the gas station, Anna replied. That took a while, Gabe remarked. Yeah, well, the whole world is falling apart out here. But we're here now, Anna explained. Good. What's the situation at the gate? Gabe inquired. Do you remember that 2-for-1 Tuesday promotion we did over the summer? Anna asked. Yeah, Gabe responded. Well, it looks worse than that. There's a ton of those people just inside and around the gate. And I don't know why in the hell the speakers were making that sound, but it brought another 50 running over, and there's more coming out of the woodwork, Anna said. Are they at the gate? Gabe questioned. No, not yet. They're caught up on the cars. But as soon as somebody gets over to the gate to close it, they're going to be running that way, Anna warned. It's okay, we'll handle it, Gabe replied. How? Anna pressed. James is on it. He's running the show, Gabe said. Anna's tone softened, shocked at the revelation. Really? You're letting James run things? Anna asked. Yeah, well, nobody seemed to be listening to me, and Wesley cracked me over the head with a table. I may not be the smartest man in the world, but I know when I'm beat, Gabe admitted. Consider yourself lucky, Gabe, Anna replied. Why's that? Gabe inquired. Because if we knew that all we had to do was crack you over the head in order to get things running smoothly, we would have done it years ago, Anna joked. Gabe chuckled, acknowledging the truth in her words. Yeah, you're fired, Anna, Gabe quipped back, both of them breaking into laughter, knowing it was all in good fun. Just hang tight out there. Don't move or draw attention to yourself. As soon as James gets back to me, I'll be in touch, Gabe said. You got it, Gabe, Anna confirmed before hanging up the phone and plugging in the charger. She didn't know how much longer the phones would be working, but she wanted to take advantage of them while they were up. So what are we supposed to do? Carson asked. The only thing we can do. Hurry up and wait. Chapter 11. James and Tex sat in the first train car, gazing out of the windows at the serene beauty surrounding them. Despite the horror of their situation, the natural splendor of the night captivated them. The sky was adorned with countless stars, their brilliance only slightly dimmed by the gentle glow of the moon. The moonlight illuminated the mountains, casting a breathtaking scene worthy of a painting. Tex spoke up, his voice filled with nostalgia. You know something, partner? On nights like this, I wouldn't even go home after a full day's work. I'd just sit out back of the trick shoot shack, get a little fire going, and just stare into the heavens until I dozed off. It's funny, that was some of the most uncomfortable sleep I ever got. But I swear it was some of the best too. James nodded, reflecting on his own past. Normally when my shift ended, I would be the first one out to my car, eager to get home to stare at a screen until I passed out. It's kind of sad that it took whatever this is to make me realize how badly I wasted my time. You're what? 25? Tex asked. Yep, James confirmed. You're still a young little whippersnapper. You could have wasted another couple of decades and still been better off than me, Tex chuckled. James smiled at the old cowboy. Well, that may be true, but we're both here now, so that's something at least. I'm with you there, partner. I'm with you there, Tex agreed. As they approached the storage building, James pointed it out. Looks like this is our stop. Tex nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant storage building. Together, he and James strode purposefully to the back of the train, the metal railing cool beneath their palms. They stepped off onto the uneven ground below, their movements fluid despite the slight jolt. As they advanced, the looming silhouette of the storage building stood tall. 50 yards away, a flicker of movement drew their attention, prompting them to quicken their pace. Tex tightened his grip on his weapon, his muscles taut with anticipation, while James clutched his bludgeon. Within 10 yards of their destination, the sound of banging reverberated from the building's door, sending a shiver down their spines. They veered off course, positioning themselves strategically to approach from behind. James moved forward cautiously, his senses heightened, while Tex stood guard, his rifle poised for action. As James closed the distance, a sudden movement caught their attention. The creature, sensing their presence, whirled around, its eyes locking onto Tex. Without hesitation, it bolted towards him, a blur of instinct and aggression. James sprang into action as he lunged towards the ghoul, the weight of his bludgeon heavy in his grip. With a powerful swing, He struck the creature squarely on the back of its neck, a sickening crack echoing through the air as it crumpled to the ground. Tex wasted no time, rushing forward to secure the fallen foe while James stood guard, his breaths coming in ragged bursts. With the immediate threat neutralized, they scanned the surrounding area, their senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Satisfied that they were momentarily safe, they turned their attention back to the storage building, only to find another lifeless body sprawled on the ground, its skull gruesomely shattered. James wasted no time, his concern for Emma driving him forward as he approached the door, his knuckles rapping gently against the wood. Emma, are you okay?" he called out urgently. After a tense moment, the sound of movement from within reached his ears, followed by the unmistakable sound of a lock being undone. The door creaked open, revealing Emma standing on the threshold, her expression dazed but relieved. James and Tex closed the distance, concern etched on their faces as they approached her in the moonlight. "My God, are you okay?" James asked. Emma nodded weakly. "Yeah, I'm okay." "What happened?" James inquired. "I was moving some boxes when one of those things snuck up on me," Emma explained, her voice trembling slightly. "I managed to take it out before it could get to me, but then another one showed up." James nodded, understanding dawning on his face. "And then you waited for us?" Emma nodded again. "Yeah, I figured you guys would come back for me." "Of course we were coming back for you," James reassured her, giving her a playful wink before adding, "I haven't lost a new employee yet, and I'm not about to start today." James couldn't help but crack a smile at his feeble attempt at humor, but Emma's response was a forced one, her eyes betraying the turmoil within as she nodded before stepping away. James moved to follow, but Tex's hand on his shoulder halted him in his tracks. "Just give her a minute," Tex advised. "It'll give us time to get this cannon ready. We've got about 25 minutes until showtime." Nodding in agreement, James joined Tex by the cannon, their hands deftly sorting through the materials scattered on the ground. For the next 15 minutes, they labored under the moonlit sky, squinting at the instructions with furrowed brows. Neither had experience with cannons, and failure was not an option. As they worked, Emma returned, her presence a welcome interruption to their struggle. "Hey, you doing okay?" James inquired. Emma offered a weak smile. "Yeah, I'm good, James. Thanks. I just needed a few minutes." "We've got things under control here if you need more time," James reassured her. But Emma's composure wavered, a hint of emotion seeping through her facade. "James, I shot a man in the head and then spent half an hour locked in a room I didn't know if I'd ever get out of," she confessed, her voice trembling with the weight of her ordeal. I need to focus on something other than my thoughts." James nodded understandingly, reaching out to offer comfort. Emma's touch lingered on his hand before she composed herself and turned her attention to the cannon. "What do you say, Tex? Think this could use a woman's touch," she quipped. Tex chuckled softly. "I don't see why not. Give it a shot." As Emma delved into the task at hand, Tex sidled up to James, concern etched on his features. "Is she okay?" he asked quietly. "First time shooting somebody," James replied somberly. Tex nodded in understanding. "Yeah, it can take a little time, but we'll make sure she comes out the other side." The two men observed in anticipation as Emma worked on the cannon, their gazes fixed on her with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. After a few tense minutes, she stood up, beaming with satisfaction as she turned to them, offering an enthusiastic thumbs up. "It's good to go. How much time do we have before the train gets here?" she asked. "About 5 minutes," James replied, his eyes flicking towards the horizon. "Will a 2-minute timer work?" Emma pressed. "I believe that'll be just fine, miss," Tex said. Emma prepared the fuse, snapping off the appropriate length and attaching it to the cannon before motioning for the others to assist. "Come on, let's get this into position," she urged. Nodding in agreement, James and Tex joined her, maneuvering the cannon away from the building and aiming it towards the wooded area across the tracks. Tex retrieved a lighter from his pocket, his hand poised to ignite the fuse. You just give me the signal," he instructed. "I say as soon as we see the train in the distance, we light it up," James said. "It's only about 90 seconds away, so we'll have a good window to hop aboard." Emma furrowed her brow in confusion. "Why are we cutting it so close?" "Because every second is going to count," Tex explained. "We need to pull those things as far away from Main Street. We don't control the train, and it makes a lot of noise." James nodded before adding, "The last thing we want is to pull those things away, only to have the train pull them back. Another minute or two of them running through the woods could be the difference." Their discussion was interrupted by the distant sound of a train whistle, drawing their attention down the tracks where the approaching locomotive could be seen. "That's our ride," James declared. Tex flicked the lighter, putting it to the fuse. "We're hot." The trio bolted down the tracks toward the oncoming train, their breaths ragged with exertion. But their sprint was abruptly interrupted by a deafening boom that echoed through the night sky, causing James to skid to a halt. "What in the hell? I thought it was set for 2 minutes," he exclaimed, panic creeping into his voice. "So did I. I don't know what happened," Emma replied. "It doesn't matter, just run," Tex yelled. With no time to spare, they resumed their sprint, their hearts pounding in their chests. But their progress was hindered by the emergence of moans from the nearby tree line. James cast a worried glance towards the source and spotted half a dozen creatures emerging from the woods, their eyes gleaming with hunger. "Tex, on the left," James shouted. Tex's eyes followed James's gaze, spotting the 2 zombies barreling towards them. He skidded to a stop, drawing his 6-shooter in one fluid motion. 2 quick shots rang out, finding their mark with deadly accuracy, but the gunfire only drew more unwanted attention. As they continued their desperate sprint towards the train, which was now a mere 40 yards away, Tex glanced over his shoulder and saw a horde of creatures converging on them from both the tracks and the woods. "Get on the train," he yelled. Before James could respond, Tex came to an abrupt halt, his movements swift as he unleashed a barrage of gunfire from his full 6-shooter. The shots rang out in rapid succession, 5 of them finding their mark with deadly precision, felling the approaching creatures with well-aimed headshots. With more undead closing in, Tex holstered his empty gun and drew the other, his movements fluid and practiced. Taking careful aim, he squeezed the trigger, the shot ringing out and dropping another creature in its tracks. As the relentless horde closed in, Tex glanced back towards James and Emma, who were nearing the rear of the train but slowed by their previous sprint. "All right, Tex, let's show these varmints what you got," he declared. Tex holstered his 6-shooter and slung his rifle over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the advancing horde as he made his move. With a calculated precision, he veered away from the train, putting distance between himself and his companions, his boots pounding against the gravelly ground. As he ran, he fired off a single shot from his rifle, the loud crack echoing through the night, drawing the attention of the creatures towards him. With their focus redirected, he took a few steps further from the tracks, luring the undead from the other side closer, consolidating them into a single group. The zombies from up the track were closing in fast, their eerie moans growing louder with each passing second. Meanwhile, the smaller mob from the woods was hot on their heels, their pursuit undeterred. Planting his feet firmly on the ground, Tex steadied himself, his gaze fixed on the approaching horde from the tree line. He unleashed a barrage of shots, the rapid succession of gunfire cutting through the night air. 4 of the 6 shots hit their mark, dropping several creatures in their tracks and causing chaos among the ranks. With a quick glance back towards the train, Tex saw James waving frantically, urging him to hurry aboard. But Texas remained steadfast, his focus unwavering as he continued to engage the oncoming zombies. Ignoring James's calls, Tex fired off a few more shots while slowly backing away from the tracks, drawing the creatures further away. Finally, as the train thundered closer, getting within 10 yards, Tex stole a quick glance back, his heart pounding with relief as he saw Emma and James safely aboard. Tex turned and bolted towards the tracks as the horde of zombies closed in on him. They were practically on his heels and gaining ground quickly. Tex planted his foot on the rail, pushing off with all his strength, and leaped to the other side of the tracks. He landed hard on the ground, the impact jolting through his body, but he rolled smoothly and sprang back up, aiming his rifle down the tracks. A rush of relief flooded through him as he realized he had timed his jump perfectly. Several zombies stumbled onto the tracks just as the train thundered by, its massive form hurtling towards them with deadly force. The sickening crunch of metal meeting bone echoed through the air as the train plowed through the undead. As the carnage unfolded before him, Tex quickly positioned himself to run alongside the train, his muscles coiled with tension. James and Emma lent him a hand, pulling him over the railing and into the safety of the train car. "That was one hell of a move," James exclaimed. Tex grinned, a sense of exhilaration coursing through him. "I used to love those movie serials growing up," he admitted, "and at least once in every single one of them, a cowboy would jump in front of a train to escape. I always wanted to do that." The tension of the moment broke, replaced by laughter as James and Emma joined in. James clapped Tex on the back approvingly as they made their way back towards Main Street. Chapter 12. Melody, Wesley, and the three patrons huddled behind the makeshift barricade of stacked tables, their eyes fixed on the situation unfolding outside the saloon. The distant roar of a cannon reverberated through the air, rattling the windows. "Good God," Wesley murmured. "They probably heard that on campus." Melody's brow furrowed with concern as she surveyed the scene outside. "Which is why we need to get to the gate and shut it," she said firmly. "The last thing we need is more of those creatures inside the park." One of the men, Henry, nodded in agreement. His long dark beard was in stark contrast to his bald head. Despite being in his mid-40s, he was very well built. "I know you said we need to close the gate, but how do we do it?" Henry asked. "Is there a button, or what?" Melody sighed. "It's low-tech, unfortunately," she explained. "There's a swinging gate on either side of the entrance. It's one of those fancy gold-plated post gates. It's heavy as hell, but once you get it going, you'll be all right." Henry absorbed the information, nodding thoughtfully. "How do we secure it? Do we have to chain it up?" "No," Melody replied, shaking her head. "Once it hits the middle of the entrance, it snaps into place. So if you can get it going with enough momentum, you can just throw it in that direction and it'll shut." Henry nodded, turning his attention back to the dwindling number of creatures outside. Most had fled towards the source of the cannon blast, but a handful remained, with a couple of them continuing to pound on the front glass of the saloon. "Well, the cannon got most of them," Wesley remarked, his hand gripping the handle of his weapon tightly. "Looks like we're going to have to handle the rest." "Let's just hope there's not too many of them between here and the gate," Melody muttered. Wesley and Melody rose from their crouched positions, preparing to make their way towards the back of the saloon. As they moved, Henry rose from his seat and fell into step alongside them. "It's okay, Henry, you don't have to come with us," Wesley said. Henry waved off the suggestion with a dismissive gesture. "No offense, but I'm not leaving my fate up to a couple of college kids," he replied gruffly. "Hell, most of the time I'm hesitant to let you bring me my food." Wesley couldn't help but chuckle at the remark. "To be honest, I'm a little offended." Melody joined in with a wry smile. "I totally get it. I'm a student up at the college, and I'm surprised that half my classmates are smart enough to put their pants on without a step-by-step guide." Henry cracked a smile at Melody's remark, nodding in agreement as they made their way towards the back bar, where an assortment of weapons awaited them. "What about the other two?" Wesley inquired, his gaze shifting towards the remaining patrons. Henry shook his head solemnly. "She's a basket case after what happened to her husband. And if it wasn't for me, that other guy would be dead." Melody nodded as she reached for her bow and quiver, ensuring that her arsenal was fully stocked. Wesley and Henry each armed themselves with a couple of tomahawks, securing one on their belts while gripping the other tightly in preparation for the impending battle. "We need to clear the ones on the street out before going for the gate. Just follow my lead," she said. Henry hesitated for a moment, his gaze drawn to the corner where three bodies lay, each with an arrow lodged in their heads. Despite his initial reluctance, he nodded resolutely and fell into line with Wesley and Melody. Following Melody's lead, they approached the back door of the saloon cautiously, pausing to listen for any signs of danger before pushing it open. The group emerged into the open space behind the building, scanning their surroundings for any lurking threats. Their attention was drawn to a lone zombie shuffling near the back of the neighboring building, its decaying form moving with purpose towards them. Henry took charge, pushing Wesley aside and stepping forward to confront the creature head-on. As the zombie closed in, Henry seized it by the shirt, holding it firmly in place before raising his tomahawk high above his head. With a swift and decisive motion, he brought the weapon down with all his strength, the blade connecting with the creature's skull with a sickening crunch. Blood sprayed as the head split open, the zombie convulsing briefly before collapsing to the ground, lifeless. Henry pulled his weapon free as Melody signaled for them to move forward. Guiding them around the side of the building, Melody raised a hand to halt their progress, her eyes fixed on a creature across the street entangled in a metal trash can. She drew an arrow from her quiver and took aim. Melody's arrow flew true, striking the zombie in the side of the head with deadly accuracy. As the creature slumped against the metal trash can, its impact reverberated with a loud clanging sound. Quickly reloading her bow, Melody remained vigilant, but the creatures in front of the saloon showed no sign of stirring. With a nod of reassurance to Henry, she guided the group to the front corner of the building, where two zombies continued their assault on the door. Henry positioned himself beside Melody, his tomahawk at the ready, while Wesley stood back, ready to assist as needed. With a decisive step, Melody rounded the corner, her arrow finding its mark as it struck the side of one zombie's head. However, the sudden movement drew the attention of the other creature, which charged towards them with alarming speed. As the zombie closed in, Henry stepped forward, his powerful swing connecting with precision. The blade of his tomahawk buried itself into the creature's forehead, dropping it to the ground in a motionless heap. With a swift motion, Henry retrieved his weapon as Melody motioned for Wesley to collect her arrows. She herself retrieved the arrow nearest to her, her movements efficient and purposeful. Henry's gaze scanned Main Street, noting the relative quietness with relief. "Looks like we have a clear run to the front gate." Melody nodded in agreement. "Let's not waste time then." The trio raced down Main Street, their footsteps echoing against the deserted buildings, Wesley trailing closely behind Melody and Henry. As they approached City Hall, a light whistle drew their attention upwards to the roof, where Gabe stood watching over them. "Be careful when you get up to the gate," Gabe cautioned. "Anna said there's a lot of those things in the parking lot, and they're riled up from hearing the cannon go off." "We'll get it closed," Melody said. Gabe nodded as they continued their sprint up Main Street, rushing towards the gate as fast as they could. "Why isn't he helping us?" Henry questioned. Melody shook her head with a knowing smile. "Trust me, he's dead weight." Henry cracked a smile before responding. "Let me guess, he's the boss." Melody chuckled softly as they pressed on. As they neared the two straggling zombies, Henry stepped forward, dispatching the creatures with swift, lethal blows before they even had a chance to react. With the immediate threat neutralized, the trio continued their advance up Main Street, halting at the last building before the front gate. From their vantage point, they could see the parking lot littered with the undead, their numbers posing a formidable obstacle. "I'm following you," Henry said. "We're getting the gate on the right first," Melody instructed. With synchronized nods, Henry and Wesley acknowledged Melody's lead, breaking cover and sprinting with all their might towards the front entrance. The open space offered little protection, leaving them vulnerable to detection if they were spotted by the creatures lurking nearby. Arriving at the gate on the right, they gripped the golden bars, their muscles straining against the weight as they fought to set the heavy metal gate in motion. After a grueling struggle, they finally managed to get it moving in the right direction, its momentum building as they swung it wide. "Start letting go," Melody commanded. Wesley released his grip first, stepping aside to clear a path for Henry to follow suit. With a final push, Melody let go as well, moving out of the gate's path as it swung into place with a resounding clang, sealing off the right side of the entrance. "Get to the other gate," Melody shouted. Rushing to the second gate, they grabbed hold and pulled, their muscles straining against the resistance. With the creatures from the parking lot closing in, they pushed with all their might, desperate to get the heavy gate moving. "Push, push," Henry yelled, As the gate reached the halfway point, the first few zombies from the parking lot collided with it, their weight and force slowing its momentum. The trio strained against the resistance, their muscles burning with exertion as they fought to keep the gate moving. Bloody arms reached through the gaps in the gate, the grotesque faces of the undead pressing up against the metal bars. Forced to lean back under the onslaught, the survivors adjusted their positions, lowering themselves on the gate and redoubling their efforts to push. But as more creatures joined the fray, the gate's progress faltered, eventually grinding to a halt under the combined weight of the pressing horde. "We have to fight back," Henry yelled. With one hand still on the gate, both Henry and Wesley swung their tomahawks wildly, their blows striking out at the encroaching zombies. Some swings glanced off the metal posts, inflicting only superficial wounds, while others found their mark, delivering fatal blows to the undead assailants. Yet despite their efforts, the tide of creatures continued to press against the gate, their sheer numbers overwhelming the survivors. 20 zombies now crowded against the barrier, their collective force causing the gate's momentum to not only stall but to begin reversing, inching back towards its starting position. With the gap between the gate and closing it still a good 15 feet apart, the mob of zombies stood in their way, their flailing arms pelting the survivors as they pushed against the resistance. Melody's scream pierced the air as a creature grabbed her shoulder, pulling her closer to the gate. Without hesitation, Henry reacted, anchoring himself to the ground to maintain pressure on the gate while swinging his tomahawk with lethal precision. The blade struck the creature's elbow with enough force to sever the forearm clean off, freeing Melody from its grasp. "What are we going to do?" Wesley yelled. As if in response, Gabe's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. "Carson's driving through. Watch yourselves." All three of them looked up, their eyes widening as they spotted a set of headlights barreling towards them at breakneck speed through the sea of undead. "Get back," Melody shouted. In a synchronized motion, all three of them ran backward from the gate, allowing it to open a little more just as Carson's car arrived. With precision timing, Carson steered the vehicle perfectly, jumping the curb and gaining air before plowing into the mob of creatures. Bodies flew in all directions, some crushed beneath the wheels of the car as it barreled through the crowd, narrowly missing both gates. Carson slammed on the brakes just as he cleared the entrance, bringing the vehicle to a screeching halt. Though a few creatures still stood in their way, the majority of the resistance was eliminated in the wake of Carson's daring maneuver. "Melody, clear them out," Henry commanded. Melody wasted no time, grabbing her bow and swiftly firing off a couple of shots through the slats in the gate. Her arrows found their marks, striking the last two standing zombies in the head as Henry and Wesley pushed against the gate. Though the bodies impeded their progress, the trio's combined effort eventually allowed the gate to roll over them. A few moments later, Henry and Wesley slammed the gate shut, sealing off the entrance. "Come on, we gotta finish the job," Wesley said. Henry nodded solemnly as they turned their attention to the mass of broken bodies strewn across the ground. They let out a sigh before setting about the gruesome task of dispatching the remaining undead, cracking skulls with their tomahawks and using arrows to stab them, while Carson joined in with a tire iron from the trunk of his car. The broken creatures on the ground moaned and crawled towards them, but their shattered bodies rendered them little threat. It took a few minutes of concerted effort, but eventually they were all eliminated. "That was some damn good driving, Carson," Melody remarked. Carson shrugged modestly as he joined them, wiping blood from his hands. "While I'd like to say that was due to skill, that was 100% luck." Melody chuckled softly, a hint of relief in her laughter, as Anna approached with the phone in hand. "It's Gabe," Anna said, passing the phone to Melody. Excitement bubbled in Melody's voice as she took the phone. "Anna and Carson are safe, and we got the gate secured." Chapter 13. James, Emma, and Tex sat in the back car of the train as it circled back around towards Main Street, watching as a horde of 15 zombies chased after them. "How much longer do we have until we reach Main Street?" Emma asked. "Maybe 5 minutes," James replied. "What are we going to do about them?" Emma pressed. "Still figuring that out," James admitted. Just then, The radio crackled to life, Gabe's voice breaking through the static. "James, do you copy?" Gabe asked. "Yeah, I'm here, Gabe. Give me some good news," James responded. "Anna and Carson are back safe, and the gate is secured. For the moment, Main Street is ours," Gabe reported. "That's good news. But Main Street might not be yours much longer," James warned. "Oh no, what's going on?" Gabe inquired. "The cannon went off a little sooner than we thought, so we have some followers," James explained. "I'll get Melody and the others over by the station to help out," Gabe promised. "Good, because we're less than 5 minutes out," James confirmed. "Do you have any ideas?" Gabe asked. "Yeah, but none of them are good," James admitted with a chuckle. "They rarely are," Gabe replied. "Hey Gabe, are there any speakers on the backside of the park? Like where the storage building is?" James asked. "Yeah, there's one back there," Gabe confirmed. "Is there any chance you can isolate it?" James pressed on. "Should be able to." "Why?" Gabe questioned. "I want you to get that feedback loop going back there," James instructed. "That speaker isn't that loud. It's not going to pull those things from the train to it," Gabe replied. "I know, but it should help cover the noise I'm going to make and keep the ones that are up there where they are," James explained. "I got you. I'll do that right now," Gabe said. "Then get help over to the station, because they're going to need it," James said. "I'm on it," Gabe affirmed. The line went dead, leaving James to look over to Emma and gesture towards her holster. "Any chance you can let me borrow that?" he asked. Emma nodded in understanding, quickly unfastening her holster and handing it over to him. "I thought you didn't know how to shoot," Tex interjected. "I don't, but I'm pretty sure I can figure out how to pull the hammer back," James replied with a chuckle. "What are you going to do?" Emma inquired. "You two are going to get up to the first car and jump off as soon as you get to the station, then get down to Main Street," James explained. "I'm going to stand at the back and fire at them to make sure those things follow me." "To where?" Emma asked. "I'm going to get back up to the trick shot building," James said. "Lay low for a bit and hope that when the train goes by the next time, any stragglers will follow it." "Why don't you let me do that?" "I should be able to pick most of those varmints off from the back," Tex suggested. James shook his head firmly. "I'm only going to fire a few times. If we start unloading on them, more of those things will come back. Besides, you need to be here to get the defenses how you like them." Tex thought about it for a moment before nodding in agreement. "Well, if you have your mind made up, can you grab something for me while you're at my shack?" Tex asked. "What do you need?" James inquired. "There's a few more boxes of ammunition on the table, and there should be some more guns tucked away," Tex explained. "We might have some more people on Main Street that know how to shoot." James nodded, giving Tex a thumbs up. "You got it. Now get to the front car. We're about to hit your stop." Tex nodded and walked away, while Emma offered James a comforting pat on the shoulder as they made their way towards the front of the train. They stood by the door, anticipation building as they waited for the train to pull into the station. "As soon as this door opens, you put your head down and run as hard as you can," Tex said. Emma nodded as Tex placed his hand on her shoulder, offering a steadying presence before their escape. With bated breath, they waited as the train rolled into the station, coming to a halt. As the door slid open, Tex urged Emma forward, pushing her out ahead of him before following closely behind. Gunshots echoed from the back of the train, but it wasn't enough to divert the attention of all the zombies. Tex spotted one creature that had followed them onto the platform, its gaze fixed on them with single-minded determination. Rather than waste precious ammunition, he focused on running towards Main Street, the empty road stretching out before him. As they crossed the threshold of the buildings, Tex glanced over and spotted Melody standing nearby, an arrow poised and ready to fly. "One's coming," he yelled. She didn't flinch or divert her attention as Tex and Emma dashed past her, her gaze locked on the opening. In a heartbeat, the creature thundered through, hot on their heels. Without hesitation, Melody released her arrow, its tip finding its mark in the creature's head. It staggered a few steps before collapsing face first into the earth, sliding to a halt mere yards from Tex and Emma. Tex seized Emma's hand, yanking her toward the building's side, whisking her out of view just as the train lurched into motion. Meanwhile, James discharged a few more rounds from his six-shooter, diverting the zombies' focus as the train chugged past. As the train rumbled past the station, Melody, Henry, Wesley, and Carson emerged, armed and poised for action. They hastened toward the station, scanning their surroundings for any signs of trouble, finding none. Their eyes trailed down the tracks, witnessing the train's tail end vanishing around a bend. "I hope James is okay," Melody said. James stood tall on the rear of the train car, his eyes fixed on the horde of 15 creatures still in hot pursuit. With a weary exhale, he reloaded his six-shooter before slipping back into the car. Taking a seat, he stretched out as the crackle of the radio broke the silence. "Tex and Emma are safe," Gabe said. "Good to hear," James replied. "We're gearing up defenses," Gabe continued. "I'll keep the radio on me, so if you need anything, just give a shout." "Got it," James acknowledged before stowing the radio in his pocket, tuning out Gabe's subsequent words. His mind was preoccupied with the imminent tasks at hand. "Ah, James," he muttered to himself. "What have you gotten yourself into?" With a heavy sigh, he made his way towards the front of the train, gun in hand and senses on high alert. As the train halted for the bank robbery scene, he took cover behind a seat drenched in blood, aiming at the automatic door poised to open. As the door groaned open, he held his breath, steeling himself for whatever might emerge. To his relief, the compartment remained empty. As the train resumed its journey, James pressed onward. Approaching the front, he glanced out the window, gauging the train's speed. Though not breakneck, it was certainly faster than he would like. "There's no way I'm jumping off at this speed," he muttered. He sighed heavily, resigned to wait until the train halted for the trick-shooting show before making his move. "You can do this, man," he muttered to himself. "It's only 50 yards to the door." But his optimism was short-lived as reality set in. A curse slipped from his lips as he realized his blunder. "You left the front door locked, dumbass. Remember?" he chastised himself. "You're going to have to run around to the back and go in through the window." Shaking his head in frustration, he peered out the window, spotting the approaching lights of the stop. Without further ado, he hoisted himself out through the window, positioning himself on the side of the train, gripping the handrail above the window. As the crisp night air washed over him, he stole a glance back toward the rear of the train, where the relentless mob of creatures still pursued. "Just don't follow me. Just don't follow me," he pleaded to the night. With a deep breath, he braced himself as the train gradually decelerated. When it reached a manageable speed, he leaped down, his landing less graceful than he'd hoped. The commotion of his descent caught the attention of several creatures lingering at the train's rear. With eager moans, they began closing in on him. "Damn it," he muttered. James sprinted with everything he had, quickly closing the distance to the building. 20 yards away, he stole a quick glance over his shoulder, dread creeping in as he spotted a group of 5 zombies hot on his heels. With no other option but to press on, he pushed his legs harder, desperation fueling his every stride. Just as he reached the corner of the house, he sensed movement beside him. With reflexes honed by survival instinct, James veered sharply around the corner, the sound of a zombie colliding with the building echoing behind him as it stumbled to the ground. Yet, the remaining 4 remained steadfast in their pursuit. Rounding the back corner of the house, he lunged through the open window, but his haste caused him to trip over the windowsill, sending him crashing to the ground with a jolt. For a fleeting moment, dazed by the impact, he lay still. But as he heard the ominous moans of the creatures drawing nearer, it snapped him back to the moment. James sprang to his feet as he confronted the approaching zombies at the window. He aimed his six-shooter, pressing the barrel against the forehead of the lead undead. The gunshot rang out, and the creature recoiled, its momentum toppling the others in a chaotic tumble. Seizing the opportunity, James slammed the window shut, drawing the curtains closed and barricading it with a hefty bookcase. For what felt like an eternity, he remained vigilant, his grip on the gun unwavering as he monitored the window for any signs of breach. Gradually, the absence of disturbance signaled the departure of the creatures. Exhausted and drained, James sank into a nearby chair, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. Running a trembling hand through his tousled hair, he released a heavy sigh of relief. "Well, that was fun," he quipped, a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "I never want to do that again." Chapter 14. As the midnight hour descended, the train finally eased into silence as it rolled into the station for the final time that night. Melody perched atop a small outbuilding adjacent to the station, her bow drawn taut, scanning the surroundings for any straggling zombies that might have trailed the train. With a sigh of relief, she discerned none. After a few extra moments, just to be sure, she lowered her bow and reached for the radio. "Hey Gabe, we're good over by the station," she reported. "Good, come on back, we could use a hand," Gabe responded. "I'm on the way, but it might be a good idea to have someone keep watch." "Just in case," Melody suggested. "I'm going to send one of the park guests over there," Gabe assured her. "Good deal, I'll see you in a minute," Melody acknowledged before stowing the radio away. Gabe, meanwhile, strolled down Main Street, where a hive of activity unfolded. The approximately 20 survivors labored diligently, fortifying the street for the imminent clash with the undead that still roamed the park. As he walked among them, his gaze alighted upon Tex, stationed in the middle of the street just outside City Hall, who was staring down the street intently. "You all right, Tex?" Gabe inquired. "Just fine, Gabe. Trying to figure out where the best ambush spot is going to be," Tex replied, his attention fixed ahead. "Where do you want them to come from?" Gabe asked. Tex gave Gabe a puzzled look. "I was under the impression that they weren't exactly controllable," he remarked. "They seem to like noise, and there's a whole string of speakers spread out through the park. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm pretty confident that I can steer a good number of them," Gabe explained. Tex pondered for a moment before gesturing straight down Main Street, towards the woods where a path cut through it. "You reckon you can bring them down that path?" Tex inquired, pointing directly at it. "Straight down Main Street?" Gabe echoed, considering the proposition. After a moment's thought, he nodded. "Yeah, I think I can make that work." As their conversation continued, the lights illuminating Main Street suddenly dimmed, casting an unsettling darkness over the area. Gabe raised his voice to reassure the group. "Everybody calm down, we're okay. The lights are just on a timer. They'll click back on tomorrow morning," he reassured them. The reassurance seemed to pacify the group, who returned to their task of fortifying the area. "Losing the light is bad, but what about the speaker that's keeping them occupied on the other side of the park?" Tex queried. "It's on a separate system, so should still be good to go," Gabe confirmed. "Do we have someone on watch?" Tex pressed. "Yeah, one of the park visitors," Gabe affirmed. "It might be wise to have a few people keep watch," Tex suggested. "What about the fortifications?" Gabe inquired. Tex shook his head after a moment of consideration. "If we try and do it now, it could go bad," Tex explained, gesturing towards the partially obscured moon in the sky. "If those critters show up when we have a big cloud roll by, we're going to be blind. We're going to have to wait until the sun comes up." "Okay, I'll let James know and find a couple of people to keep watch." "Do you need anything from me?" Gabe asked. "Not at the moment, partner," Tex replied. Gabe nodded in acknowledgement and strode away, leaving Tex to wander down the street. As he ambled, Tex observed the industrious efforts of the people fortifying the buildings on either side of the street. 2 layers of defenses were evident. A row of debris outside each building, providing maneuvering space, and another row just inside the doors, ready in case the exterior barrier failed. Mid-stroll, Tex was joined by Emma, Anna, and Carson. "Hey Tex, have you heard from James about how many guns we're going to have?" Emma inquired. "Not yet, Emma," Tex replied, "but I know I have 4 or 5 more rifles laying around. What are you thinking?" "I talked with the guests, and a few of them are hunters. I thought it might be a good idea to get them up on the rooftops alongside you Emma proposed. I like that idea, Emma, but I'm not going to be on a rooftop, Tex said. Emma looked puzzled. Where are you going to be? I'm going to be right here in the middle of the action, Tex declared, gesturing towards the street. That's a little dangerous, don't you think? Emma said. It will, but once we get some tables and barrels set up, I think I'll be just fine. The longer I can hold them on me, the safer everybody else is going to be. Plus, being up that close to them, it'll be like shooting fish in a barrel, Tex explained confidently. Emma's tone turned playful. That's not very sporting, now is it, Tex? What would your trick-shooting ancestors say about that? Carson scoffed before speaking up. Trick-shooting ancestors? Is that what you're telling her, Tex? He turned to Emma. Old Tex here used to be a big shot banker down in Charlotte. Tex shot Carson a piercing side glance, conveying his disapproval. Carson, realizing his misstep, offered a slight nod before excusing himself. I'm going to go help them set up, Carson announced, eager to distance himself from the awkward moment. You do that. Tex replied tersely. Anna, sensing the tension, stepped in with an apologetic tone. Sorry about Carson. He's a dumbass. Tex turned his attention to Emma, who wore a reassuring smile. Don't listen to him, Tex, Emma chimed in, her voice laced with encouragement. Tex momentarily shed his cowboy persona, speaking in a more casual tone. He's right, though. I was a banker, and a damn good one. But by the time I hit 40, I was burned out, my wife left me, and I had myself a good old-fashioned midlife crisis. So I looked in the mirror, stared deep into my soul, and asked the only question that really mattered. What did I want to do with my life? Tex paused, as if transported back to the pivotal moment when he made the life-altering decision. I thought back to my childhood, where every day growing up I dreamed of being a cowboy. After a little research to see if it was even realistic, I cashed in my retirement, spent a couple of years training every single day, moved up here, and got a job. And I've been Tex ever since. Tex took another moment to compose himself, visibly affected by the breach of his facade by Carson. Emma, sensing his vulnerability, stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Tex, I want you to listen to me. What you've done tonight, and what you're going to do when those things come our way, is special. There's a lot of us who wouldn't be here if you weren't here, myself included. So it doesn't matter who your ancestors were, they'd be proud of who you are, Emma reassured him. Emma's words resonated deeply with Tex, warming his heart and bringing a genuine smile to his face. After a moment of reflection, he nodded, snapping back into his cowboy persona. Thank you, little lady. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Come on, I could use some help circling the wagons, Tex said with a smile. Emma and Anna nodded in agreement as they departed to assist Tex with the preparations. Meanwhile, they spotted Melody, who was returning from the station. She nodded as she made her way back towards City Hall. As she walked, Wesley came running up to her. Hey, did you have any trouble with the train? Wesley asked, his breath slightly hurried from the jog. There was nobody behind it, so we're good until it starts moving again tomorrow, Melody replied. While you were doing that, I dug through the costume shop and found something for you, Wesley announced eagerly, reaching into a bag and extracting a stunning Western dress adorned with a rose pattern. Melody's eyes widened with surprise and delight at the sight of the exquisite garment, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked generic Western wear she had been wearing. My God, that's beautiful, Melody exclaimed, her appreciation evident. Yeah, a few years back, they had an Annie Oakley impersonator who would go around, pretending to do trick shots and whatnot, and this was her outfit. I know it's not exactly the same thing since you have a bow and arrow, but I figured. Wesley trailed off as Melody stepped forward, seizing him by the shirt and pulling him in for an impulsive kiss. Taken aback by the unexpected gesture, Wesley hesitated for a moment before reciprocating, his surprise quickly giving way to a smile. I'm sorry, that's just the nicest thing anybody has done for me in a long time. You know, besides saving my life a couple of times. I know you have a thing for Anna, Melody confessed. Who? Oh yeah, that was more of an infatuation, Wesley admitted, his smile widening as he glanced at Melody. I tell you what, let's survive this. and I'll take you out to dinner. See where this goes," Wesley proposed. Melody responded with a hint of sassiness in her voice. "Take me out to dinner, huh? Where did you have in mind?" After a brief moment of contemplation, Wesley cracked a smile before shaking his head in amusement. "We'll get it to go and have a picnic." "I like it. Come on, there's still a lot of work to get done," Melody agreed, her spirits lifted by Wesley's thoughtful gesture. Gabe observed from the window of City Hall as Melody and Wesley walked off, their hands intertwined. A small smile graced his lips as he reflected on their budding connection. "Good for them. Just wish I didn't have to get a concussion to help that along," Gabe remarked to himself, a hint of wistfulness in his tone. He walked over to the radio, picking it up and clicking it on. "Hey James, do you copy?" Gabe radioed. "Yeah, Gabe, I'm here. I noticed the lights went out. How much trouble are we in?" James's voice crackled through the device. "We should be fine. I have the speaker still going out at the storage building. But with no light, Tex wants to wait until morning to launch the attack," Gabe said. "That sounds good to me. I'm beat and could use a few hours sleep. Besides, I can't go anywhere until those things outside decide to wander off," James replied. "Were you able to find some guns? Because we have some hunters here who can put them to good use," Gabe inquired. "Yep, got 4 rifles and enough ammunition to take out every one of those things left in the park 10 times over," James said. "All right, we're going to be sleeping in shifts over here, but I'm going to always have someone monitoring the radio. If you need anything," Gabe assured. "You'll be the first to know," James replied. "Get some rest, James. We'll see you in a few hours," Gabe said before clicking off the radio. James set the radio down on the table and made his way over to a small couch. He attempted to get comfortable on it, but the cramped space proved to be a challenge. This state is one of the furniture capitals of the world, and the only couch they could find wouldn't be big enough for an elementary school sleepover, James muttered to himself, shaking his head in amusement. He removed the cushions and dropped them on the floor before grabbing a dingy pillow and blanket to settle in. As he covered up and tried to get comfortable, he could still hear movement outside. "Okay, guys, I'm going to take a nap, and when I wake up, I expect you to be gone. Because when that sun comes up, we're going to be taking the fight to you." Chapter 15. As the sun rose over Main Street, Tex stood at its heart. His 2 6-shooters nestled in their holsters at his hips, and a lever-action rifle slung across his shoulder. The sun's rays stretched across the dusty road, painting long shadows. Only a tumbleweed was absent from completing the classic Western scene. Tex surveyed the street, observing both civilians and park staff armed with whatever weaponry they could muster. 6 figures dotted the rooftops, 4 guests clutching rifles that James had brought during the night, and Melody, proudly donning her new attire, her bow gripped firmly in her hands, stood beside Wesley. Adjusting his hat with a practiced hand, Tex addressed the assembly. "Okay, folks, the moment is upon us. In just a few minutes, the enemy is going to be running right at us from the far end of the road. We have done everything we can to prepare for these varmints, and make no mistake, we will win the day." A chorus of cheers erupted from the crowd, the fervor rising as they psyched themselves up for the imminent confrontation. "I am proud to lead you into this fight. Now let's get this done," Tex declared, his voice resolute, echoing through the tense air. Tex pivoted, finding Gabe stationed beside the makeshift barricade crafted from barrels and tables. It stood chest high and about 5 feet in diameter, offering limited maneuverability but enough protection for 1 person. "Are you sure about this, Tex?" Gabe said. "I sure am, partner," Tex affirmed. "Somebody's got to keep those critters occupied, and I'm the best man for the job." With Gabe steadying the stepladder, Tex climbed into his defensive perch. Glancing down, he spotted a couple of boxes containing ammunition for both his rifle and 6 shooters. "Are you ready to do this?" Gabe inquired. "Send up the signal," Tex responded. Gabe received a confident nod from Tex before darting toward the City Hall office. Inside, a few civilians lingered. While they had been useful in setting up the defenses, they would be liabilities in a fight. "Make sure that door is secure." "And then hold on to your butts," Gabe said. One of the older women complied, securing the door with a deadbolt. Meanwhile, Gabe returned to his office, preparing the speaker setup and ensuring the right sequence was programmed. "Here goes nothing," Gabe muttered to himself as he deactivated the speaker near the storage shed and activated another down the tracks. 3 minutes should be long enough, he said, his eyes fixed on the clock as the seconds ticked away. When the time elapsed, he triggered the next speaker, hoping to keep the approaching horde in motion. As the minutes passed, Gabe's gaze flicked to the monitor connected to the trick shooting location's security camera. What he saw rendered him momentarily speechless. Holy Mother of God, Gabe gasped at the sight of hundreds of frantic, ravenous zombies converging towards the source of the noise. Despite his shock, Gabe continued the sequence on the speakers. Several nerve-wracking minutes later, he deactivated the last speaker before Main Street. Before triggering the feedback, he addressed the crowd through the speakers. "Here we go, everybody. There's a lot of them. Good luck." Gabe triggered the feedback, eliciting winces from most of the people present. However, Tex remained steadfast, standing tall in the middle of the road, preparing his rifle for action. Despite the piercing noise, Tex and the others could still discern the excited moans and approaching footsteps, growing louder with each passing moment. Tex, his demeanor unwavering, tightened his grip on his rifle as the sound intensified. Within minutes, the first of the zombies emerged onto Main Street, approximately 40 yards from Tex. The resolute cowboy raised his rifle, aiming carefully and squeezing the trigger. Though the bullet missed the head and struck the ghoul in the throat, it was enough to draw its attention. With a guttural moan, the zombie charged towards Tex, trailed closely by dozens of its undead comrades. From their vantage point, Melody and Wesley observed the approaching horde, gasping at the sheer number. "My God, there's hundreds of them," Wesley exclaimed in disbelief. "It might even be more than that," Melody added, her eyes scanning the rooftop hunters nearby, who mirrored her shocked expression. "As soon as Tex starts firing, start picking them off. Focus your fire near the middle of the pack," Melody yelled out to the hunters. The two hunters nodded in unison, their fingers itching to pull the trigger as they aimed their lever-action rifles, eagerly awaiting the signal to commence firing. Meanwhile, Tex remained poised in the center of his barricade, his focus fixed on the approaching horde. Just before they reached him, he raised his rifle and unleashed a volley of shots towards the oncoming onslaught. For a tense 15 seconds, Tex methodically took aim, fired, and reloaded, each round finding its mark. With each shot, a dozen creatures fell to the ground, only to be replaced by the advance of the mob. The impact of the creatures against the barricade sent it staggering backward, eliciting a momentary pang of worry in Tex's mind. However, there was no time to dwell on it, he had to keep firing. Tex aimed his rifle straight ahead, firing off the last 3 shots while sweeping the barrel across the front of the pack. In an instant, 3 bodies slumped over the edge of a table, adding to the growing pile of fallen foes. Quickly reaching into his pouch, Tex retrieved a handful of ammo for his rifle, loading it with haste. As he did so, the creatures continued to swarm around the barricade, encircling his sanctuary entirely. "It's showtime," Tex yelled. Tex raised his rifle towards the ghoul directly in front of him, pulling the trigger with precision before swiftly reloading and repeating the maneuver. Despite his frenzied onslaught, the barricade he stood upon began to falter under the constant weight and thrashing of the ghouls. Spinning slowly on his heels, Tex continued to unleash round after round, each shot finding its mark with deadly accuracy. Yet, even after emptying another rifle's worth of ammunition, the horde showed no signs of dwindling. Meanwhile, atop the rooftops, the hunters joined the fray, their shots ringing out at regular intervals. Though not as rapid as Tex's gunfire, their steady aim found numerous targets amidst the sea of undead that stretched down Main Street, nearly back to the trail. Melody, clutching her bow, loosed a couple of well-placed arrows into the mass of creatures below. Yet, it felt as if her efforts were merely drops in a vast, relentless river of undead. Deciding to conserve her dwindling supply of arrows, she instead surveyed the scene unfolding beneath her. Across the street, in front of the saloon, James and a group of survivors engaged in a desperate struggle. "Keep swinging," James shouted. James's voice rang out as he drove a tomahawk deep into the skull of a zombie, withdrawing it before pivoting to engage another undead assailant. Alongside him, Emma and 4 others swung their weapons with desperation, fending off the onslaught of creatures pressed against their barricade. A cry of alarm pierced the air as one of the park guests found himself ensnared by the grasp of a ghoul, yanking him into the mass of undead swarming against the barrier. James turned to help, but before he could react, the man was dragged over the barricade, his screams abruptly silenced by the ravenous horde. "We have to keep fighting," James yelled. James, Emma, and the others unleashed a flurry of vicious headshots, felling several zombies before the tables began to buckle under the continuous assault. James planted his foot firmly at the base of one of the tables, attempting to hold it in place, but it was clear that too many were faltering. They managed to dispatch another half-dozen or so undead before the inevitable became apparent. The barricade wouldn't hold much longer. "Get back inside," James commanded urgently, prompting Emma and the others to rush indoors. With one final kill shot, James dispatched a zombie before darting through the door just as the tables collapsed under the weight of the horde. Diving over an overturned table near the entrance, James landed hard on the ground as the others quickly pushed the table into the doorway, wedging its feet between the frame for additional support. 2 men dropped to one knee, bracing themselves against the table with their shoulders and pushing with all their might to hold it in place. Meanwhile, Emma wasted no time, swinging her weapon with precision, striking down a few grasping arms before finally connecting with the top of a zombie's head. With a resounding crack, her tomahawk split it open. James scrambled to his feet, rushing over to aid in the defense. He swung his arm down to strike at the outstretched limbs of the encroaching ghouls, creating an opening for a decisive attack as he drove his tomahawk into the top of a zombie's skull. Glancing outside, James observed the mob thinning slightly as the gunfire intensified, but his attention was soon drawn to the building across from them, where zombies were flooding inside, overwhelming the defenses by the door. "Oh my God," James said, stunned by the sight. However, he quickly shook off the shock, knowing that they had no choice but to continue fighting if they wanted to survive. Back at the center barricade, the creatures pressed forcefully against the tables and the remains of dozens of fallen zombies, their sole objective to reach Tex, who remained undeterred as he loaded more bullets into his rifle. "Don't you worry, fellas. I've got enough lead for all of you," Tex yelled. Tex unleashed another volley of rifle rounds, aiming for the heads of the zombies along the barricade line. However, as his rifle clicked empty, he heard the ominous sound of wood beginning to give way behind him. Glancing back, Tex saw a zombie squeezing through the opening in the table and barrel. Without hesitation, he drew his 6-shooter and fired behind him, the gun held upside down as he executed the creature with a trick shot born out of necessity. Tex dropped the rifle, readjusting his grip on the 6-shooter and fanning the hammer 5 more times, delivering precise headshots to each intruding undead. With a quick gesture, he caught Wesley's attention. "Tex needs our help," Wesley shouted, rallying Melody and the others on the rooftop to action. They quickly maneuvered into position, focusing their fire towards the besieged barricade. Melody sent several arrows flying in Tex's direction, adding to the onslaught of firepower. The concentrated barrage of attacks alleviated enough pressure from Tex, allowing him precious moments to reload his weapons. After several tense moments, he was ready to resume his assault, popping off round after round into the mass of zombies. Spinning around while firing, Tex systematically cleared out the entire back and left sides of the horde, relieved to see that they weren't immediately filling back in. "We got them on the run," Tex shouted. "Forget killing them. Just hold the table in place," James commanded. Emma nodded in agreement, joining the others on the ground to push against the table, their combined efforts aimed at holding it in place until reinforcements arrived. They held their ground, their resolve unwavering despite the zombies continuing to push. Several tense minutes passed for the group holed up in the saloon as the gunfire outside continued unabated. Finally, the cacophony of battle fell silent, followed by a whistle emanating from the middle of the street. James peered out, spotting Tex standing amidst a pile of defeated zombies, his hand poised over his holstered 6-shooter. "Why don't you leave my friends alone and come pick on someone your own size?" Tex challenged. In response, the last 3 remaining ghouls sprinted out from the saloon entrance, sprinting towards the cowboy. With a theatrical flair, Tex drew his 6-shooter and fanned the hammer, dispatching the undead with deadly accuracy. With a theatrical flourish, Tex blew the smoke away from his 6-shooter before twirling it around and holstering it. James offered a thumbs up to Tex, who responded with a respectful hat tip. Then, Tex scanned the area, addressing the group. "Does anybody see any other movement?" Tex surveyed the group, noting the unanimous shaking of heads indicating no further signs of movement. His gaze then fell upon the street, now nearly entirely covered in the lifeless bodies of the undead. He removed his hat, placing it over his heart in a gesture of respect. "I'm sorry this happened to y'all, I really am. But we're going to take care of you, I promise," Tex declared solemnly. James walked out to join Tex, his eyes scanning the horrific scene before giving his friend a comforting pat on the shoulder. "Yeah, we will, Tex, we will," James affirmed. "But first, we need to make sure this park is completely clear," James continued. Tex pointed up to a pair of hunters stationed on the rooftop. "I need you 2 on the next train. Ride it around the park. Make sure we don't have any stragglers," Tex instructed. The hunters nodded as they made their way back towards the roof hatches. Meanwhile, Tex and James stood side by side, observing as other survivors emerged from the buildings. "That's some fine work you did, Tex." "Some fine work indeed," James remarked. Both of them allowed a smile to creep onto their faces, followed by some survival horror laughter, as neither of them knew how to process the horror they had just survived. Epilogue. 2 days later. As the sun began to cast its golden hues over Main Street, Melody and Wesley found solace atop the saloon, sharing a box of cheesy fries, savoring the simple joy of each other's company. Meanwhile, Gabe emerged from the City Hall office, stretching after a restless night's sleep on the sofa. He made his way over to the saloon, where James, Tex, and Emma sat around a table, nursing cups of coffee. "Morning, everybody." Gabe greeted them, his eyes lighting up at the sight of the coffee. "I don't suppose there's any more of that, is there?" he inquired eagerly. "I just made a fresh pot," Emma replied, prompting a wide grin from Gabe as he helped himself to a cup before joining the group. "So, what's the good word?" Gabe asked. "We got the rest of the graves dug overnight," James reported. "Half the people didn't have identification, so we may never know who we buried there," Emma added. "I'm pretty sure there's a lot of that going around," Gabe remarked, drawing curious looks from the group. "Somebody popped up on my radio last night," Gabe continued. "Nice fellow, said he was just passing through on his way down south somewhere." "Did he have any news?" James asked. "He was camping in the mountains, and before the phone went down, he said he talked to his brother in Charlotte, and it's not good," Gabe revealed. "How bad?" Emma asked. "It was hit hard. The man started to get emotional, so I didn't push him on it, since it sounded like his brother didn't make it. But he did say that this was apparently happening everywhere in the country," Gabe explained. A long, somber silence descended over the table as the weight of the news sank in. "So, it looks like we're going to be here for a while," James remarked. "How does the inventory look?" Emma asked. "We got a shipment just before all this happened, stocking up for the spooky nights. So the food supply should be pretty solid," Gabe said. "Does that mean weeks? Months?" Emma asked. "Months if we ration properly," Gabe confirmed. "There's only 18 of us in the park, and that shipment was for hundreds a night. If we're smart, it'll last us a while. And if we start running low, there's a bunch of family farms up here. It'll be dangerous, but if we need to stay here long term, we should be able to get the resources to do so," James added. Gabe raised his cup of coffee, prompting the others to clink theirs together. "To surviving the day," Gabe toasted. "To the fallen. May their souls be at peace," Tex added solemnly, his voice filled with reverence. The group nodded in agreement, clinking their glasses once again before falling into a reflective silence as they continued sipping their coffee. Though they were safe for the moment, they knew that they were only at the beginning of a long and perilous journey. The end. The end.